to our February 21st, 2023 working session, 9 o'clock working session. Let the record reflect that all 5 commissioners are present. Scott is on Zoom and the rest of our management team is here. So we're starting off with Mike Burgess. So Mike, welcome and good morning.
Morning, commissioners. Hope you're all doing well. Going to be more of an update type visit today. Not a lot of new bills being introduced. We are at a point in session where we passed the policy committee cutoff this past Friday. So that's any bill that doesn't cost money has to have been passed from its committee. And we're spending most of this week in the fiscal committee. So if there was a policy bill that costs money, it was referred to the Ways and Means or the Appropriations Committee. And those are being heard yesterday, today, tomorrow, till the end of the week. To give you some idea of volume, each of the hearings, they'll do about 30 bills in public hearing. So like Ways and Means goes in today at 9 o'clock. They probably won't finish their work till close to 5 o'clock tonight, because in addition to doing all those public hearings, they are voting on bills they heard the previous day or kind of the day before. So kind of a mad dash to this Friday's fiscal cutoff. And then we will then spend a couple weeks with the House and Senate being almost exclusively on the floor, passing all the bills from their House of Origin and transitioning back to committee in early March. Just want to give you a heads up on these budget items, just to let you know that Jeff did a lot of work the last week and the week before in getting all of our budget requests in. So that'd be on the capital, operating, and the transportation side. We have legislative sponsors for all of those things. So we checked all of those boxes. We won't know what those budgets look like, of course, until they come out. And I don't think we'll see those until probably the budgets until mid-March. It'll be another month-ish or so. Well, maybe a little bit less than a month till we see those budgets. As I have been meeting, I've been making another round of meetings with members of the Spokane delegation, just checking in on those budget issues, in addition to a list of bills that I wanted to run through with you here in a minute. But yeah, just general update there that we've checked the box on all the transportation stuff, or excuse me, all the budget stuff between capital, operating, and transportation. And thank you to Jeff for doing that. It was a lot of work for him to coordinate getting those forms filled out, talking to your proper staff members, and getting them shipped over to me, and then or just directly to committee staff or legislative staff. So thanks to him for that. If you have any questions on those items, could answer them, but otherwise I'll just transition to the bill list that I wanted to walk through with you all.
Any questions for Mike so far? No, I'd say go ahead and transition.
Okay, so you have a list in front of you, or I think it'll probably get brought up on the screen. So I have been sending you all weekly updates that I know you read and can't wait to see those every Friday or Saturday if I send them in the morning. And I know you read them very thoroughly. But if you missed a few things, these bills are bills that are on that list I send you, and I have prioritized them, and that's reflective of these bills being ones that we've talked about as a group the first 6 weeks of session, or they are reflected in your legislative agenda items. So, and this is the list that I plan to continue to talk to your delegation members and other legislators about as these bills move through the process. These bills are moving. I have removed a handful that we might have talked about, or they were on the list. I've taken them off. If they're not going to move, it's not worth spending any more time on them. I can just run through them real quickly. If you want to stop and interrupt me, why don't I do this? Why don't I run through all the support ones first, and then you can talk about those, and then we'll move to the next section. Probably the easiest thing to do. This is the vehicular pursuit bill. The House version is the one that is moving. I do remain skeptical, though, that ultimately this bill will pass. There is another version that's on my list here that we'll get to. That is a Senate version that looks a little bit more like having it be kicked almost to a work group to decide on what a model policy could look like And I think just in talking to folks, that's probably the one that's going to ultimately move, but the House may move the broader bill, this 1363, before the cutoff. So we'll have to wait and see if that happens. The next one is 1460. Commissioner Waldorf, that's the one that you brought to the commissioners a couple, 3 weeks ago. That bill is moving. I added it to the support list. I think I'd gotten direction from you all to do that. The behavioral health contracts. This is the bill that's back. That is the WASAC priority, that will help, that we talked a couple of weeks ago about, that will help free up some dollars in your contracting process. Next is the state broadband map. Added that one either last week or the week before. And then 5258 is the condo liability bill. It has, you'll see underneath it, it's got 1298. That's the House version that didn't, I don't even think it got a hearing, but it's not moving. 5352 is that other vehicular pursuit bill. I put that down there as support. We haven't really talked about, I think that in talking to you all, your preference would have been for the other bill, which was actually a policy. 5352 more seeks to design what a policy could look like in the future. So I do have that down as something that you all would support based on the feedback I got on the original bill. But if you wanted to change that, you could let me know. And then 5369 is the PCB bill we talked about first or second week of session. So if there's any questions about those that I listed as support, if you feel like you want to change any positions on there, please let me know. Again, I'm trying to reflect conversations, and it's very likely I missed something or need some more clarity.
Hey, Mike.
Yes.
Did any condo related bill get through condo liability get through the policy cutoff?
Yes, Commissioner, that's the one. 5258 is moving.
It is. So, okay. Sorry, I misheard.
Oh, no, sorry if I mumbled there. So it says
too, it wasn't moving. So.
Sorry.
The House
Sorry.
dead at this point. Okay.
I said the House one isn't moving.
Okay.
So you can see there that it says it's in Senate Ways and Means. So it has moved to the Fiscal Committee, and it has a hearing. It's either today or tomorrow, but that bill is in a good spot. Sorry if I confused you there.
Thank you.
Yeah.
That's good.
Okay. If we want, can we move to the opposed, or you have any other questions there?
No, I think, thanks for that clarification. That was going to be my question as well.
For sure. Sorry about that. The next one there on the opposition list, this is the prejudgment interest bill. We talked about that, fits under your agenda for maybe not necessarily an unfunded mandate, but potential cost increase to the county. That bill is moving. It is in the Ways and Means Committee. And if you have any questions about that one, we can move to the next list or the next page there, where I have some bills listed as neutral. And neutral here because 5536 is a bill that deals with the Blake decision. I just put it as neutral because we haven't really talked about it, but it is on your legislative agenda. And then the county commissioner's salary bill, I guess we should probably move that to support now that I think about it, because that bill is in a good spot, and I just want to continue to monitor it as it moves through. But I do need to talk to your staff and get a better understanding of the 5536, the Blake bill, and how that might impact the county moving forward. But again, those were reflected, or we talked about the county commissioner salary bill. So I'll probably move that commissioner salary bill to support if that's okay with you all.
So Mike, on the commissioner's salary bills, so you've been working with Vicki on that?
Yeah, there was a lot of back and forth to get the language right. A fellow commissioner of yours in another county weighed in quite a bit on that, but I think that the bill now is in a good spot. Okay,
because Thurston County commissioners were weighing in, as well as I think Stevens County.
Correct.
Okay, so we've got it all figured out.
But yeah, it took it took a couple 3 days. There was a lot of emails bouncing back and forth, but I think they got themselves to a product that works.
Okay, awesome, thank you.
And Vicki, she let me know that. Okay.
Great.
And then the next grouping is I list them as concerns. In some ways, it's maybe more we would oppose them now based again on our conversations. But this is the first one there, 1050. That's that apprenticeship utilization bill. The bill was amended as it came out of the Capital Budget Committee yesterday to try to give local governments a little more flexibility in how they deal with it. But in talking to others that are working this bill on behalf of different public associations, so it's not just WASAC, other associations that represent local government and public entities still continue to have concerns with the bill. And so I will continue to express those concerns with the prime sponsor, that is Representative Riccelli, and other members of the committee. Don't know if you have any comments specifically about that bill.
Yeah,
if you
Mike,
do, that'd be great. Yes, Commissioner.
Yeah, so last week, this bill did get quite a bit of conversation at LSC, and there continues to be a heightened level of concern about the cost impact to counties in terms of finding contractors that can do this, but also because there's a limited number of contractors, and especially in the rural counties, they're worried that they won't be able to find anybody to comply with this and stuff. So there continues to be this heightened level of concern about, a great intent, but workability of it as it's defined is going to be difficult to achieve.
Yeah, thank you, Commissioner. And those have been the themes that I have brought to legislators, the potential for cost impact, and then I just have been referring to it as the limit to the amount of the workforce. And that was kind of your second point there.
I have a question on that. Mike,
Sure.
can you give us some detail on how the bill was amended to provide more flexibility? Because it was my understanding that it only required a good faith effort to meet those apprenticeship requirements. And so is that still the language, or is it even more flexible now?
So, Commissioner, if it's okay with you, let me do this. Let me get the email, or I want to email you all back with this specific amendment, and because there was some other email traffic that I've been a part of that I want to read through and then send you what the impact was. Because I know what you're talking about, the good faith, and though that amendment hung, I still don't know that the different advocates on the public side are satisfied with that amendment. It might not have gone far enough. And so let me get it to you and get some more clarity and detail on it. But I know what you're talking about. But don't know that it went far enough is the explanation I got.
The conversation last week was there's no definition of what good faith is. And so it becomes subjective, and then you could go through a lot of time and energy and expense and then not meet the bar and then find out that all you've done is wasted a lot of money. So there's still some vagueness in terms of what is the threshold to be able to say, okay, we did this, we're good. So that's part of the concern.
Okay.
Yeah, Commissioner, when I mentioned it didn't go far enough, there was a lack of clarity in some of the amendment language.
I'm hoping, Mike, you can just give us some more specificity on how the language shook out and where the bill's at, because I'm supportive of the concept. I'd just like to know more about where it's at status-wise.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's a good concept, and something that I think a lot of people support, but it's not a matter of what, it's more about how.
Right. Fair enough.
You will get a follow-up email from me, commissioners, about that.
Thank you.
Thank you.
For sure.
Definitely on the
I'm
good
having
faith
trouble
effort
finding
part,
what to
everybody
change
has a
this
different way of doing it, the feds, state, local, so it's not as easy as you think from a contractor's perspective, and so now that it's going down to the subcontractors, they're not as geared up to handle that, so it's harder for them to do it. And again, in areas where, it's, as a subcontractor, it's more of a specialty item, and you don't actually, necessarily always have the workforce to support it.
Right.
So with that, on the good faith effort part, then, how much documentation do you have to have, what's required, and it's more onerous process than people think from a contractor's perspective.
Right.
The next bill, 1129, that's the mobile home park bill. I have it on the list as high with concerns because though the bill is fixed for us, I want to make sure it stays fixed. So that's just kind of my notation to keep following that bill and paying attention to it as it moves through the process. I've told our delegation members that the bill's good now, that from our perspective, well, the goods bill now from our perspective, there's other policy concerns in that bill for other people or priorities for other folks. But no news from us would be good news, meaning the bill stays in its current form or doesn't, if it does change, doesn't impact what we've done. So good shape there. Next bill is the solid waste management bill, the RAP Act, the recycling bill. I've heard, we've talked about this, maybe not in great deal the last couple of 3 weeks, but I know that I've heard concerns from you all as to, well, some of you anyway, what the cost impacts could be to the county. That if the county did ultimately end up wanting to be involved in this, making sure you have the ability to have full cost recovery and the like, things like that. So I wanted to continue to notate it there. Do you have any comments on that one, commissioners?
Commissioner French does.
Yeah, so last week we had a pretty good conversation about this, and it continues to be a concern across both sides of the state with regard to the program. But I did talk to Travis about, the possibility of incorporating some language that allows for counties that have waste to energy plants to be excluded from this program. There is an option available to opt out of the program, but it's kind of a clumsy mechanism. But if they could exclude counties with waste energy, because we don't take our waste to a landfill, we take ash to the landfill. And so why are we being treated like, we're getting no credit for being environmentally sensitive, and we're getting no credit for creating an alternative source of electricity. And so there should be some kind of offset for that. So Travis was going to try and float that and see if he could get any traction on it.
Okay, I can check with Travis. But Commissioner, I don't know how to ask this question. I know Spokane's unique because it has the waste energy plant for sure. But why would what is the rationale for why that is different? Why does this bill impact Spokane County differently because it doesn't landfill its waste? Does that question make sense?
Yeah, because the recycling programs that they want to put into place, we already have. And so we already have a Smurf. We already have transfer stations to where you can recycle glass and plastic and all of these other things. So we already have in place the systems that they want to try and create for other parts of the state. And they're going to incur a cost to create those programs for other counties when we already have it, which means that our taxpayers are going to pay twice for what they're already getting.
So your argument would be it would be duplicative over what's already being done.
Yes.
Okay, that's helpful. The next bill.
Sorry,
Oh, sorry.
Could I ask, is this trying to then create that type of the Smurf facility that, separates all the plastics and glass and all of that? Is this trying to replicate that in other communities?
Basically, that's what it's trying to do.
Have a one-stop.
Yeah, it creates a recycling program to where, they've even talked about, a cost for glass, for recycled pop, for instance, and stuff. And so, but basically what they're trying to do is create a recycling system to be able to capture stuff before it goes into the waste stream.
Right, which we have.
Which we already have.
So we should get some sort of credit.
So we ought to get some kind of credit for it, or be exemption.
Have something like that too
No,
already?
they still landfill. And so the only.
Even though they have a recycling program, they don't have a way of taking it out of the stream once, if people don't put it in there correctly.
Right.
Okay.
And stuff. So we've as a county, we've already made the investment to put into place recycling systems to do what the state is trying to do statewide. But we should get credit for the fact that we already have this, and we should not be paying a price or a surcharge to be able to fund a program in other counties. And that's what this program does, is it taxes our people for recycling when they already do it, and in some cases, pay to redo it or pay to recycle, and then pay for somebody else's, some other counties, the ability to create a program. So I guess what I'm saying is we are ahead of the curve and we're getting no credit for it. So what they want to do is create a statewide program to do what we've already done, but they want us to pay for the statewide program. And I'm going, no, wait a minute, we've already paid for that cost. We already made those investments. We ought to get credit for that. We shouldn't be taxed twice. Does that make
Commissioner,
sense?
well, Commissioner, let me ask you this then. So you all have negotiated rates with your haulers. I guess I'll just call them the haulers. And that's the cost of what you're talking about is built into those rates that your consumers pay.
Yep,
That's accurate?
yep.
Okay. So then I'm the consumer. I separate my cans and bottles and whatnot. I do the recycling. I have the separate bin, but then my neighbor doesn't. My neighbor throws everything in the garbage. Their garbage gets separated before it gets burned.
So
It may not.
you have, if you're in the service areas for our collectors, you have both waste and recycling bins.
Right.
You already have those. The only ones that don't have that are in the very unincorporated areas that don't have waste pickup. But what they do is they take their waste to transfer stations that have that recycling option. And so whether they get it curbside or whether they get it at a transfer station, they have the ability to separate out the waste and recyclables.
But if I throw a bottle in if you accidentally throw just a Diet Coke can in your garbage, it's going to get burned, right? It's not going to get sorted out.
No, it's going to get burned.
Okay. All right. That's what I was trying to understand.
Yeah, and then the police will come to your house.
I hear you. Okay. That's helpful. I'll talk to
So wait,
Travis. I might,
So are they out of this, sorry, it's a 125 page bill.
Oh, it started out at 148.
I'm skimming, but I guess I should just look at the underlined parts, but are they trying to get at the recyclables that don't go in the recycle bins? I'm confused as to what they're trying to do, because ultimately, you're always gonna miss a few. But we have the thing where you can put everything in one bin and then they go and they separate it all out, the newspaper and the glass and the plastic. So, but this is to try and basically generate more revenue for more sophisticated recycling
well,
operations.
but commissioners, ultimately the goal is to make the producers responsible for the cost.
Okay,
So if I'm a bottle maker or a pop cans, whatever, that it's going to incur cost upon them to set up these programs to make sure that products are being recycled. I don't believe the intention is to disrupt the current system, but to augment it. But Commissioner French is correct that undoubtedly there are costs that are going to be incurred, and ultimately that, that's an argument, will that get, passed down to the consumer or not. The other part of the bill that part of the reason it's so big is it does include a bottle deposit component right now, like Oregon's got. That would be new to Washington State, but obviously that's a way to incentivize, or advocates would tell you that's a way to incentivize recycling. And there is no bill right now in Olympia that is more, I don't know if lobbied is the right word, but there are more stakeholders involved in this bill right now than any other one in the state or in the legislature. So it's a big bill, but when we talked a couple of weeks ago, I mentioned there's a couple aspects to this. First, in your role as the county, if the bill were to pass, can you mechanically implement the bill? And so if you choose to be, they refer to them as a pro, so it's a product, the O is the organization. But anyway, if you choose to be kind of one of the central hubs to to this. Can you mechanically do it? Can you get your cost recovery taken care of? And I believe, from what I've been told by Travis and others at Wasac, that the bill is moving in that direction. Having said that, though, that does not account for the concern that this could be a cost, this would raise cost on your constituents. I wouldn't call that maybe the aspirational side of it, but there's kind of the mechanical side, and then there's the cost that gets, again, shifted out to the public. So those are kind of the two ways I've been looking at this.
Well, and to piggyback on what he said, the cost is going to be passed on to the producers. Producers will pass it on to the consumers. Consumers will see a price increase. We're already challenged with an inflationary environment, and now you're going to superimpose another cost on top of it to cover a recycling system that already exists. And so part of my concern is that those at the lower end of the income scale in our county are going to be paying twice for a program that they are, they're going to be paying a surcharge for a program they're already paying for in our waste collection system. So
I mean, they could choose to bring all their bottles and get the 10 cents or whatever. But right now, I mean, they're putting those in a system, they're paying to have those recycled through their garbage recycling bills.
So, we 2 cans, 1 garbage, 1 recycling, we already.
It could incentivize more, but yet, like you're saying, people are already paying into the system to do it.
Right, and then it's just the fact that you've then got to bring it back somewhere.
Yeah, I know,
And where's that?
which is
And
the
so-
transportation cost anyway.
Yes. So then you've
Well-
got low-income people when they're trying to, like, if it's at the grocery store, like in some states. or
Yeah,
what,
it might be convenient, but
it's.
So
But
commissioners, would it
The
be
other part of
helpful?
it is that some of these products that they want to recycle have no market. And glass is a great example of that. I mean, when I was with the city,
we got a
we had the big Colbert,
big mound of glass.
mound of glass. We couldn't give that sucker away.
You're trying to be very
And-
creative,
Yeah,
putting it anywhere we could think.
So, but it's trying to say, if there's no market, you're gonna create an artificial market to be able to gather that stuff back. It's well-intentioned, just poorly conceived.
So commissioners, would it be helpful to have Deb Geiger join us next week and maybe talk a little bit more about some of the details of it? Because I'd like to hear it from her too.
Yeah, no, I think that'd be great.
So between Jeff and I, maybe one of us could message her and do it that way.
I mean, maybe it could be targeted towards those counties where there isn't a great system and people could have deposit where there is no collection.
Right.
And then they could go and make that choice and get those dollars back. But when you already have a system that people are paying into, they're already paying
Already
monthly
doing it.
bills
Yeah.
to get that collected and separated and recycled. Anyway, it's just, if there was no system in place, you could see where this could be beneficial. But it will be less beneficial in areas where there's already more sophisticated systems.
Well, and the thing that, from our standpoint, whatever doesn't get recycled gets incinerated. So we're hauling ash, we're not hauling to a landfill, solids, we're hauling ash and stuff. So, from an environmental standpoint, we're doing everything right, and yet we're not gonna get any credit for it out of this bill.
Okay, yeah, so I think it'd be helpful then that between Jeff or I will reach out to Deb and see if she can join us next week.
That'd be good.
Great.
And then I'll do some more digging between now and then too, to have more kind of political information on it. So
Okay, Mike, one more question.
Hey, Mike, that kind of reminds me, I was curious, I don't see it on here of if there's an update on the waste to energy plant being exempted from the cap and trade program. Is there an update on that? I think there was a talk about a study, right,
yeah, Commissioner, I think we talked about this a couple weeks ago. You might have been gone, but which is fine. So there was talk of trying to run a standalone bill. Talk to my colleagues that work for Spokane interests on that issue. They decided to not run a bill, and the hope would be to have a budget proviso, so something stuck in the budget that basically accomplish what the bill would have done in terms of set up a study to do some research on the issue, and then come back to the legislature then once the study work has been done, that would set the table for legislation. So we won't know if that proviso was put in until the budget comes out, but I know the request was made.
Thank you.
Does that help you does that clear it up for you?
Yes.
Okay, so
I did have the opportunity to spend some time with Betsy on the way back from Olympia last Thursday, and asked her about this. She said that there'd been no movement yet, but they're working on it.
but commissioners, no one would know yet because the budgets haven't come out. But I know the work is being done to get it into the budget.
Yep.
On the next one there, that's House Bill 1181. That is the climate change issue, and we had talked about the capital facilities plan language being potentially inserted into that bill. Hasn't happened yet, but I know folks but the work is being done on that. Some other counties have expressed interest, and I've been coordinating that with them. So we'll have to see how that turns out. But I think we've done what we can to this point on that bill. The next one, the energy standards, commercial buildings. This is the one that would have the 2-year delay and set up the work group. Counties are still not on the work group, but the work is being done to address that, and hopefully the end product does end up in a way that's positive for the county. Then the last bill on the list, next page is 5440. That's the competency evaluation bill that we had talked about a few weeks ago. You had asked me to talk with Mr. Sparber about it. He had sent me some feedback. The point of the form of the bill now is it's voluntary, but there are some concerns about the way this would impact your jail and your workforce. And even though it is voluntary, I didn't get the sense from Mr. Sparber that it would be something that would make sense for the county to use right now because of the staffing issues involved. And then one of the other things is, I think you might have heard me last week ask, do you have space available, physical space available for a room or a building adjacent to your jail facility that you could set up a space to do the competency evaluations? It doesn't sound like there is. So the bill's got a long way to go. We've got a lot of work to do on it. It does have a hearing this morning in Ways and Means, and I was part of a broader group of county lobbyists yesterday and Wasatch staff discussing this, and I did share Spokane County's feedback on it, and it was similar to what other counties had said.
Mike Sparber is here in the room.
Oh, perfect. Sorry, Mike, I didn't see you there.
Yeah, and Mike, after talking to our mental health department, like I said, it's something voluntary. It would have to be something that was stood up outside, because our jail right now has a mental health department, and we are meeting the requirements under the Senate bill that are required for that. Anything that would have to be outside of it would require corrections officers to be there, because it has to be tailored for in custody, offenders, and that's just something we don't want to get into business with.
Yeah, we spent a great amount of time talking about this one last Wednesday, and the two concerns: one, making sure the state pays for it and it doesn't become an unfunded mandate for counties. But the other part of it, probably greater concern, is the lack of professionals to be able to conduct the competency evaluations. And so not convinced that any amount of money is going to solve that problem. So there was some talk about, changing, I don't know how far this will go. I doubt it'll go very far, but changing the requirements of who's qualified to be able to do the evaluations would be one. But the other part of it is, how do we get more people in the profession to do the evaluations? And that's going to be a factor of money, and there doesn't seem to be enough money offered up so far to be able to cover the costs. So But a lot of concern about this one, mainly about unfunded mandate.
One other point too, Mike, is that I indicated in there, the crisis stabilization facility wouldn't be able to do that because it's a voluntary
Right.
treatment facility, so it would take something more than that, so.
Yeah, it actually has to be, well, that was the other part of the conversation, thank you, Michael, was that this has to be within the existing jail. And the assumption is that there's space in existing jails to accommodate this. And when that was brought up, there was a unanimous laugh that, we got jails sitting around with surplus capacity. That just isn't the case. So that was the other part of it, is that the evaluations had to occur while in custody.
Okay, that's helpful. Some more points to relay to legislators when I'm speaking with them. Do any of you have any, can think of any other bills that we talked about that are on the list? I went through all our agendas and tried to add on anything that we had talked about that's still moving. And I'm continuing to monitor that list and reevaluate, so I might come back to it. But that list I just shared to you is probably something we'll work off of the remainder of session. And as things continue to move, or we'll drop them off as they die.
Mike and Commissioner French, I was just curious if there were any more housing affordability policies that move forward. We talked about lot splitting as an example. I was just curious for the status of those.
There are, Commissioner, and I can't off the top of my head tell you. So let me do this. In addition to 1050, I'll get you a list of the housing bills. So there's like the middle housing, there's a bill, one that deals with ADUs, the lot splitting that you're mentioning. I'll get a list together and send that to you all.
The majority of the bills that are being considered now with regard to lot splitting and stuff are really for urban areas and predominantly cities and stuff. And so there's not a lot of that conversation going on as it relates to the counties. But we're supportive of the initiatives to be able to increase density and stuff, so that but there's not a specific bill that relates to counties on that. And the other thing that we spent time talking about last Thursday was there is a bill to allow for an increase in the 1% property tax limit to allow for either 1% or the inflation factor. And so that was getting support from counties on the other side of the state. The hearing was yesterday, and Paul Jewell, and then we're supposed to reach out to you and Amber about testifying on behalf of the bill for.
They had other people that were
Did they?
testifying.
Okay, good. Yeah, so I know that.
What bill is this one?
It's going from 1% to up to 3%.
Okay.
For property tax increase, allowing for that. And putting an inflation factor on it, I think.
Okay.
Yeah.
Got it.
Record-
Isn't there one of the housing bills that might touch county around ADUs?
Yes, Commissioner, I was going to add that
Yeah.
Commissioner French is right. Most of those bills deal with things inside the urban growth boundary, or inside city limits, but you're right. There was one ADU bill out there that would have impacted us, but I don't know that it's moved.
Okay.
But that'll be on when I do the list of land use bills, that'll be on it.
Okay.
And one of the bills talks about increased density within a half-mile radius of transit. So that one would potentially affect us. But I think that's probably the only one that has some real legs to it.
Is that the lot splitting?
So
No, yeah, it's lot splitting, but it allows for increased density. And it's interesting, there's support from cities other than they don't like the fact that the legislature's forcing it on them. So there's an argument about local control. And so it'll be interesting to see how the legislature moves with regard to either local control or mandating it. So
Yeah, I mean, almost all of those commissioners, the argument comes down to local control. I mean, that's a basic tenet of Association of Counties and the Association of Cities. So anytime the legislature does something to take that away, kind of their default positions to oppose it. So they like things to be permissive. The number on that property tax bill is 1670. It's Ormsby's the prime. That's all I have, commissioners, unless you have any other questions, but you can expect to see from me an update with the more specific language on that 1050, the apprenticeship bill, and then a list. I think there's 4 or 5 of the housing bills that are still moving, but as we mentioned, primarily impact cities, not counties.
Great. Thank you. Any other questions or comments for Mike? Okay, thank you, Mike.
Okay, thank you. I'll see you soon. Have a good week.
Okay. Okay, so Rob, you're gonna be next on our list to discuss.
Got a couple things. I'm filling in for Kyle this morning. And today I have with me Hannah Thomas-Gall and Amy Sumner, both from our Team Water group. And we have a couple administrative items that we would like to address with you today. Hannah's going to provide some background on our request for qualifications process that we just recently completed to select a consultant, an engineering consultant, to assist us in meeting a variety of terms in our water quality permit, our NPDES permit for our water treatment facility. And so Hannah's going to describe that process, and we will be bringing forward a resolution because it was a unanimous decision. I'll let Hannah speak to that. And then Amy Sumner's going to provide some information about a grant that's available from the Washington Department of Ecology to purchase a water right in the Little Spokane watershed that we will be able to use against our watershed plan. So again, 2 administrative items that you'll be seeing a resolution to follow, but we're briefing you on this month. So Hannah?
I'm Hannah Thomas-Gall. I'm a water reclamation engineer. I work at the treatment facility we have out on Freya. We received our new NPDES permit in August of 2022. And among some of the changes that we had were some new studies that we need to do, including a temperature study, a sediment study, a hard metal study, and a dye tracer. So these are not realistic for us to do in-house just due to time constraints from our staff and also the expertise needed for these. A lot of these are very technically involved studies. So we put out an RFQ. We got 2 responses from TO Engineering, which has just been absorbed by Honduras, as well as HDR. We interviewed both of them, and they're both very qualified. We decided to go with HDR. They have experience with the county on previous projects, and they also have more experience on these specific studies, and they have more resources. So it will allow us to be a little bit more hands-off than with the other group. We are working with Brenda in purchasing to get a resolution for this and to get the contract drawn up.
Very good, thank you.
Can I just ask, so was that already assumed in this year's budget, and we have a budget line to help pay for those studies?
Yes, yeah, we saw this coming. We were negotiating the terms of our NPDES permit last year, so and we had an advanced look at that permit, so we knew that the studies that Hannah referenced were coming. So, yes.
So you feel comfortable they're going to be able to get those done in the time frame under budget?
We have
Or is this just the first step of getting them on board, and then you'll negotiate how much per each study?
we'll be negotiating specific terms in terms of financial aspects of
Okay.
this contract. So
But this is just saying
This
that
was a
they're the
qualifications
qualified
we're the most
engineering
qualified firm.
company. Okay.
It was a unanimous decision. So both terms were very qualified. HDR really did stand out.
So why did parametrics not submit on this?
I don't know. I don't know.
It's curious with their history with the plant and CH2M Hill.
Well, we don't have much of a history with parametrics specifically. Um, I think there may have been some thought in the consulting community that, that HDR was the consultant before. And Brown and Caldwell was a firm that has been doing some work for us. I was really hoping they would respond. Their project manager is semi-retired right now, and so
Right.
he was not interested in in leading that project. And so I know they tried to pull something together with a local firm, Landau Associates, but they weren't able to pull it together in time. We advertised right after the new year, and we sent it to all the big firms, and we could see that most all of them downloaded information, that first week of January. But then we got a couple calls later on in mid-January where they're saying, gee, can you extend the date? And we went, gosh, we downloaded this stuff 2 weeks ago. And so, I think that part of the turnout or the responses was, I know that local consultants are also hurting for staff, as much as we are. And so I haven't really had an opportunity to go out and really talk to people about that yet because we're still in the selection process. But that's what my thoughts are.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, so Amy's going to speak to a water right opportunity, some grant funding.
Yeah, so just a reminder, we have 3 sort of water resources that our section manages. We have the 2 assets, our Wyra 55 or the Little Spokane Water Bank, and the Saltese Water Right. What I'm going to be talking about is our Wyra 55 watershed plan, where we have this debt of 2,700 acre feet that we have to offset due to permit exempt wells and residential development in the watershed. On the next slide, you can see we have an opportunity to purchase the Lee water rights through an ecology stream flow restoration grant. We were given $366,000 for consultant services and the purchase of the water rights. We're estimating that the water right will be 110 acre feet. And the cost was previously negotiated through ecology with the seller for $2,700 per acre feet. So that'll come to about $297,000 for the whole water rights. Then we'll place that water right in permanent trust with ecology to go against our debt that we owe. The ecology grant works as a reimbursement grant, so the county will be putting the money up front, but the grant will cover all the costs through reimbursement. So the action item that will come forward is we need to authorize our CEO to accept the grant on behalf of the county. And I'm working with Heather Arnold to get that resolution. And a little bit more down the road, we'll need to authorize our Public Works Director to execute all of the paperwork to acquire the water right. Any questions?
I think it's gonna be great that, we're gonna get the grant to take care of that, so that's exciting. And you've been working on the Water 55, so your thoughts?
Wow. I think it's good. No, and anything we can do to offset that mitigation, those as many acres feet as we can get, little by
Right.
little.
Right.
It all adds up.
Yep, yeah, that's exactly right.
Great, thank you very much.
Well, thank you for your time.
Yeah.
Appreciate it.
Next, we have George Dahl.
everyone.
Yes.
Good to see you all.
I don't know that I've met you yet.
Yeah, so just quick introduction. I'm George. Just started recently, the first of the year with the Housing and Community Development Department. And so excited to be here, excited to have an opportunity to talk with you all today. We'll go ahead and get started with Adam if you're ready to go. He's got some funding recommendations that he'd like to present to you. And then we'll have a conversation about some prioritization regarding some other funding sources.
Good morning, everybody. So we're here to give an update and summary for the Homeless Housing Assistance Act funds. These are local document recording fees to support the homeless programs. This is the annual cycle administered by the HCD department. And these are a year-long contract. We contract from January 1st out until December 31st of the year. We released the RFP on August 14th, 2022. We closed this on September 30th, 2022. We received approximately 13 applications. 11 of those were accepted. This is more than we got last year, so it was good to see the applications grow. The total funds requested were just under 2.4 million. And of course, this leaves us a gap of 875,000. And then our HCD meeting and allocation was set on November 10th of 2022. The priorities of this were homeless prevention, diversion, emergency shelters, operation and management for those, temporary housing, supportive services, as well as street outreach programs. And then next we have just a summary of the applicants, their original proposal, the projects in which they will be administering, and of course the award that they were given. As you can see on this first chart, Family Promise was awarded the largest out of this funding. This really does reflect the growth of their shelter as we did complete the construction of the second level, and this will help fund and keep that operational for this year. As you see, we have a good balance for emergency shelters as well as temporary, transitional or temporary housing, as well as our street outreach and preventions. We also have the YWCA applying as well here to help with their emergency shelter for domestic violence victims and survivors. The two applications that were not approved were mainly not approved because of the priorities set forth by the applicants themselves. Obviously, due to the limitations of the budget that we had, just 1.5 million, we did have to cut a good amount of funding from these applicants. Family Promise took theirs off, and then Spokane Workforce Council as well withdrew their application as they would work with the other applicant for the Valley. This was, as I said earlier, this was approved by the HCDAC. The recommendations on November 10th, 2022. We have also met with the applicants as well to go over any questions and concerns, and of course, keeping them all apprised of when we can actually open up the funding and start approving these draws.
Thank you. Can you just, for our new commissioners, kind of explain how the committee works and who's all sits on the committee that's making the recommendations?
Absolutely. So the committee is comprised of our county consortium. So it's a representation from all over the county. They get together and meet regularly in communities, in their own communities, to gather information on their needs. This is also something that I've been doing since coming on to the county and reaching out to those smaller outreach services to make sure that we're addressing the needs of the communities as they ask and as they see fit. And the HCDAC basically is the representation for those communities. So of course they drive us and make sure that we are balancing this out for the betterment of all county communities.
So who's on that group specifically?
I can get you a list of the names and the towns that are represented on that committee. So we've got several vacancies. We've got one applicant that just came through that will be serving, I think, the broader South County. And so, but I think we've probably got 4 other vacancies in there as well. So that's gonna be something that we're gonna try and get ramped up on, is making sure that we've got all those seats filled.
It's a larger committee though, right? How many seats total, if they're all full?
Yeah,
How
I
many
think
would
it's,
you-
I think it's 18 total. Is that right?
Yeah. And these are all federal funds. Correct.
So it's a combination of federal and state funds. We probably have more money coming down from the state than we do the feds.
Well, were these dollars all from the State Homeless Housing Assistance Act?
Yeah, that's correct. So this is
These are all from those document
recording fees.
recording fees, right? Okay.
But the committee also looks at other.
Right, but
other-
these funds
Yeah.
are all from those state recording fees, okay.
Yeah, any funding recommendations that we bring forth to you will have gone through that, the HCDAC, the committee, whether it's federal or.
And how is that different than the continuum of care group? How do they interact?
So I don't know that we have a liaison that's on the continuum of care. Both Kat and myself, we sit on the continuum of care board to make sure that we're providing kind of that liaison between all the work that's going on, but not any direct correlation there at this time.
The continuum of care is federal funding that they're getting specifically from HUD, and it's a very small amount.
And these dollars, correct me, are these just county dollars, the city gets their own dollars?
Yeah, that's
So-
correct.
So they're separated that way. So we're looking at outside the city of Spokane with these dollars. Although, as you know, some of these providers are within the city of Spokane as well, but providing services for people outside the county.
And then we do track them unduplicated beneficiaries in the county so that we can assure we do have the information and data to point out that this money is reaching our county constituents. So it is something that we've been tracking over the last few years. I believe we started a general map in 2020, and each applicant has done a great job in representing that percentage of unduplicated beneficiaries from outside the city.
And so do you have all these folks have to upload their data
Yeah,
to
yeah, there's,
the system?
yep, through the HMIS or CMIS system.
I see on the ones that say emergency shelter or temporary transitional housing, and then you have your estimated unduplicated beneficiary. Do any of those bring on additional new beds that aren't a part of the system today? Do any of them bring on new space for somebody experiencing homelessness, or does this just cover M&O for already existing space?
So this is anticipated people that will rotate through the programs. So these are all based upon what they've done historically. Again, that's data that we're tracking and then set forth by the applicants.
But does this create additional space that isn't there today?
No, so you're correct. It is just supporting the programs that exist as they are. So it
Okay.
will be, to Adam's point, it will be new beneficiaries, new unduplicated beneficiaries, but it's from the
Doesn't grow
existing.
capacity?
Correct.
Okay.
Are the priorities identified, are those set by statute, or is there some kind of process that is gone through to set those?
Thank you for asking that. That's a very important question. And one that the briefing paper that you all received, that was the conversation I wanted to have as well. So if we're ready to pivot from the HHA funding recommendations, I'm happy to take that on.
I just was, so these funds are intended to be more flexible, because I know I'm pretty familiar with, like, the HUD homeless dollars are very prescribed in how they can be used. So is the idea with these state funds that some of these folks are, they're getting the federal funds, but these maybe cover things that wouldn't be able to be covered? So give me an example of like what that might look like. For Family Promise, for instance, like they're probably getting some HUD funds, federal HUD funds as well, to do specific shelter activities. What would these funds do that would be more flexible?
Yeah, maybe Adam, if you want to speak to the
Yeah.
HHAA.
So for a lot of the emergency shelters, what this funding does is fill in some of those smaller gaps, but what its main focus has been, from what I've seen, is really been the operations and management. So it keeps the lights on, it keeps the staff, getting paychecks, it keeps certain program needs are filled in with that money as well. And then of course, everything is outlined in the contracts and our scopes of work to make sure that we're not duplicating or that we're not, stepping on any other program that might be funding that program for that specific project.
The COC, I think there's been maybe a little bit of misunderstanding locally about the COC, and Kat made mention of this. So the continuum of care is effectively a package of funding that comes through to our region. Once upon a time, I managed that portfolio and it was 29 different projects. I think it's down to 20 or so now. And those dollars, as you mentioned, Amber, are very prescriptive to an award that was made some years ago. And so what this allows us to do is kind of fill in the gaps in services throughout our portfolio. And so it still provides, to Adam's point, some of the maintenance, the operations, some of the staffing costs, really kind of supplementing, if you will, kind of that foundational portfolio that the COC provides. But the COC's allocation is very minimal throughout the region by comparison to what we get through state and local resources.
Yeah, it was strange when I was at, like, certain groups got that funding. It would be allocated funding like 10 years ago, and it's just the same grant. That the continuum of care's job is really to make sure they're still meeting the goals of the funds, but then you can't really be innovative. You can't change up maybe how you wanted to use the funding.
Yeah, it's much more difficult to do that. Whereas with these dollars and other dollars that come through our department, we've got a lot more opportunity to innovate and address those changing needs that we have within our community.
Thank you.
Anything else on the funding recommendations before you?
No, and so that'll be on our consent agenda next week.
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
So Adam, if you don't mind going back, and if you'll pull up that priorities page. So something that's been, I've seen as an opportunity for innovation over the years in my time with the city. So those that don't know, I came from the city of Spokane. I've worked in the Community Housing Human Services Department. Started with the city in 2009 and then recently came over here. So I've managed homeless programs, I've managed the CDBG program and other programs through my tenure there. So I've done a lot of requests for proposals over the time. And we've always been at the city supported by different committees, boards, different groups that would evaluate review similar to the HCDAC committee. And one thing that always frustrated folks is the applications that come through aren't necessarily saying what they were hoping they'd say. So an example is here, we list out the priorities on this request for proposals. There's nothing in there that says diversion for whom, what target populations, who do we really want to focus on? So Amber, in your time working in Northeast Spokane, you know target populations where there are significant needs. And you all as commissioners, in your meetings with constituents and everything, you hear from folks that, hey, this population's in great need and we need to do something to address that. When you think about Camp Hope and the need to just shelter the folks there, true, but what strategic interventions can be made to address those populations to make sure that we're getting them housed or preventing them from falling into a situation of homelessness? So that's where I'd really like to engage with you all more. It's my understanding that past practices have not been as engaging with the Board of County Commissioners around priorities and funding targets. Because what I want to do with my staff is come to these meetings and say, you all asked for a picture of X. We went out and asked folks to paint that picture, and here's what we brought. Does this align with what you're seeing? as far as the needs within the county, and the folks with really the greatest needs, because the needs in Cheney may be very different from the needs in Deer Park and Spokane Valley. So that's where really I wanted to take this opportunity. Gina was great about giving us 15 minutes to present items, and I was like, we don't need that much, but I'll take whatever time we can get to talk about funding priorities, because I think that's a really important conversation to have with you all. So with that, I'd just be interested in hearing some of your thoughts.
Well, do we have a resolution on file that sets out the priorities that your committee's been using?
I think it's been defaulted to the consolidated plan, which is the challenge with the consolidated plan and the homeless plan is that they're 5-year plans. Well, when those plans were written, Camp Hope didn't exist. The Trent Resource Center didn't exist. So that's where I'd like to be more flexible and adaptive to the changing needs within the community.
When I first got here, we did adopt some priorities on an annual basis, but it got morphed into the 5-year plan and stuff. So, but things have changed.
Yeah, I mean, I would really appreciate, it would be, I don't see a lot of diversion on here in the applications. And I mean, just from my basic knowledge of working with families in Northeast Spokane the last 5 years, if we can keep people out of the homeless system, if we can identify early on if a family is in, you know, potentially gonna fall into the homeless system, become homeless, it's much less expensive, right? To divert people, figure out how to get rent paid, figure out what's going on that's causing the economic instability, health instability, whatever it is, and address it. So it just seems like that's an area that there's a lot more data around. And I know Catholic Charities has been trying to do that a little bit with the school-based council navigators that they have, like at Logan and Rogers, and they're trying to kind of connect families to housing before they're homeless, and problem solving, right? Walking them through a process of figuring out how could they pay that back rent, you know, what are the things that are preventing them from getting to work, you know, and problem solving that to then prevent getting into the homeless system, which is very expensive to fund, as we see here. So I don't know if that was where the city was going with more diversion funding, but it'd be interesting for you guys to come back and present, you know, what are your recommendations as we move, and then we could have further discussions. Because again, I'm not an expert, but I do know that it costs less to keep people housed than to let them fall into homelessness and try and pay for shelter space, which we don't have enough of here in Spokane anyway.
Absolutely. The good thing about diversion is a lot of that is covered with our consolidated housing grants. A lot of that has also been covered with our ERAP and TRAP grants. So again, with this HHAA, that was a huge focus for those grants and tons more money than what the HHA was. So this really just kind of filled in those, and with the few programs that are offering diversion, they are some of our newer applicants and our outreach ones, Medical Lake, Cheney, for example, but a lot of those diversion dollars are coming from other grants.
What's the difference between homeless prevention and diversion? Because they seem, the way we're just describing them, kind of seem like they can be just the same thing. I mean, how do they differ?
Sometimes, so diversion is basically a little bit more support, some case management, some work training, some of those programs that can help with self-sufficiency. And the other is basically like, I'm behind on rent, I can't pay my utilities.
Okay. All right, and I'm sorry, I know you referenced that, because I know there's one of them, that there are two of them that specifically have homeless prevention listed as projects. One of them got funded, being the Cheney outreach. What did you say the reason was for the Spokane Workforce Council? Well, I know it's a large dollar amount. Was it based on the number of people served or cost per person? Was that the driving factor?
Somewhat, but also the Spokane Valley Partners application. So it was basically covering the same kind of constituents and
Oh,
program.
okay.
So they withdrew just as, also we had the issues with the VOA funding.
Well, that Valley Partners says street outreach.
Yeah.
But
So
the
it was a
Workforce Council is homeless prevention for singles and families.
Yeah.
Those don't. Yeah. Okay, all right.
So I think we've taken more time than we were allotted, and thank you all for that.
You're good. Go ahead.
Back to your point about kind of coming to the board for priorities, or do you envision that happening kind of with the next cycle of funds, given that all this RFP has already happened for this pot?
So we're actually just prepping for the next round of requests for proposals. So this is another state-funded program. This is a consolidated homeless grant. So we have an application that's due to Commerce, the Washington State Department of Commerce, on April 28th. So before we submit that application, part of the overall package of the application is identifying which agencies or projects we're going to fund for that. So our goal, our timeline is that we'll release the request for proposals at the end of this month, so end of next week. And so we would love to have, no, that's not this week. So what we'd love to have is just any feedback, any thoughts that you all may have that we can insert into that request for proposals, and then just see what we can get out of that as it aligns with some of the thoughts you have. So Amber, with your...
Right, I mean, I think it would be good, I could give better feedback if I knew how much we were investing in each of those categories currently, because it's, you said there's multiple different funding sources, right? I just know the challenge has been, there aren't a lot of agencies in Spokane that do the first two. The homeless outreach, street outreach has really become much more funded and effective, through SNAP and Catholic Charities and a couple other agencies. Like, that has become much better, but you're not gonna find a lot of families on the street. So for family homelessness, it's really tricky to go upstream and identify a family. And that's why like the school-based work has been really effective, because you can kind of connect with families at the school, right? So I mean, one of my biggest concerns has been families, because kids, when they, start couch surfing and families are in crisis, has a huge impact on those kids and their ability to learn and be the future of Spokane. So that's, it just seems like families find a way to keep themselves off the street, right? They're not gonna, but they often, it's really hard. There's not a lot of agencies in Spokane that are figuring out how to go upstream. Family Promise is probably one that's wanted to do it, but it takes resources and also data. Like, there was some work that was done to maybe look at people's utility bills, like upstream, to see when people were starting to have challenges. And you could kind of see different indicators that could lead to homelessness. But I'm not sure where that ever went. There was kind of a project with Urbanova and the city of Spokane and utility, Avista. But like, if you can figure out when those warning signs are happening, then you can put money into diverting people, right? Or preventing. So anyway, those are just some thoughts I've had, but I think it would be good to know how much we're already putting in each category.
Yeah, absolutely.
And then we could give you better feedback, right? With the total dollar amounts.
Yeah, and one of the things I'd like to do is get a better, a more comprehensive picture between not just what the county's investing, but also what the city's investing, so we can do a better job of identifying those gaps throughout the regional system. Because right now, I think the city has a tremendous amount of resources, which is making it somewhat of an epicenter for a lot of those services rendered. And I think to your point, looking at our school districts and finding ways to partner with them, because rural resources are really difficult. Like, your school system is kind of your your one-stop shop there. So being able to maybe find some opportunity to engage with our school districts that are serving our rural communities, to make sure that we're targeting those families that are in the greatest need, because they do have those what they call the McKinney-Vento homeless liaison coordinators out there. So see what we can do to engage with those folks. I think that'd be a good starting point.
I would say talk to Justin Johnson as well, because there's the program, the pilot program that we're doing right now with West Valley, and adding Riverside and Freeman School District to it, that is doing these assessments with the students out there, so that at the middle school and the high school, so that way they can see what needs are
Right, I
there.
mean, if there's housing needs in those families, it'd be a great
Right.
partnership.
Because it's not just resources that we can offer offer rental assistance, we can offer housing placement, those sorts of things. So as long as we've got the provider network there to be able to support those activities, there's a lot we can do to help out.
So, because again, we've got to be, for this, we're looking inside the city, so it's like trying to figure out where those touch points are with the school districts. And I think there's that a lot of it's happening with the school districts have people in them, so it is working. But then with Justin's group, with what they're doing, I think would be, definitely able to, they're seeing, I think, more of what needs are, what the stressors are for students. And I think, getting that information. So I would check with Justin on that pilot program that's going on too. Cause it's trying to figure out, it's like we all wanna work on what's the upstream side of this versus just the downstream side, but we still gotta provide the funding on the downstream side. And I think that's part of what the, due diligence hopefully is gonna happen, because as we, kept asking, when we're doing the regional governance group on homelessness, how to get that information as to how many dollars are actually being spent, through the county and through the city. And I can tell you, the city just wasn't willing to get the information. We got pretty good information from the county. I can never get the information from the city.
Well, if we all sign this agreement, maybe we're finally gonna get the information.
Hopefully.
But I think that's a good point, because I think as we move forward with this regional conversation, we're gonna wanna know where all these dollars are doing the work on this will be helpful for that. You'll be asked to do that anyway for this regional governance conversation, right?
Yeah, no, and I love the idea of having the transparency and awareness of where we're at, where we have, because there are stipulations on where funds can be spent, and so where we have the opportunity to innovate is within that. What populations do we want to serve? And I don't think that the conversation has ever gotten down to that aggregate level. And I think that to me, $2 million is a tremendous amount of money, but when you think about serving folks with the greatest need throughout the county, it's not going very far. So we've got to be surgical in how we think about addressing those needs. Thank you all so much. I look forward to future conversations.
Thanks.
Because I don't know that we've met before
No, yeah.
either. So how long have you been with the county?
Just about a year, actually,
Just
just
about a year.
a month short.
Okay.
Hit the
With-
ground running.
Yeah, with COVID, it's like, they're, not everybody not coming to the conference room, so great to meet you both and see you. Thank you.
Happy to be here. Thanks.
Okay, Scott, that's gonna take us to Scott Chesney.
Good morning, Commissioners. The supplemental documents for you all as well as that presentation.
Actually, I'm good, thank you.
We're here to talk about Fairchild Air Force Base, of course. This is a process that in some ways has started quite a long time ago, 2014 or so, when the KC-46 was coming on board. There have been a number of these main operating bases already put into operation. This is the main operating base number 6. This is the EIS stage of the document or stage of the process. And by that, we do need to go back and kind of reinforce that while this Fairchild's been considered on a number of these, MOB 6 was part of a 2020-21 process. In December of 21, the Air Force made MacDill Air Force Base the preferred alternative for MOB 6 and Fairchild the alternate. That then started, next slide please, process up to this point of doing the environmental impact statement. As all of us know, an EIS can be quite extensive, it takes a long time. We are now at the point where that EIS has been released for public comment. And we wanted to bring it for you. There's a fairly short window for commenting on this. Next slide, please. And while the preferred alternative isn't going to change, likely change, we always, certainly my experience in the past is if you're silent, you have no chance of influencing an opinion, even if it looks like the decision's been made. And Spokane County has always been very supportive of Fairchild, and we anticipate that we would want to put before you a letter of support that could go forward at the end of this process. Next slide, please. There are a couple of public hearings coming up in case the public itself is interested in that. March 7th and March 9th for Fairchild on a WebEx link that you can see here. We will also post this information for public comment on our website if someone wants to look at that and can then link to that public hearing if they choose. Next slide, please. Here's sort of the history of where all this came from. One more, please. You can see there's a lot on here. And it talks about where they're going to be based and then the preferred alternative. And again, the main decision is in favor of MacDill Air Force Base at this point. Fairchild as an alternative is being considered through this environmental impact statement. Next slide, please. You can see the need here, as all of us know, the KC-46 is replacing the KC-135s over time. Fairchild has been the beneficiary of other bases being made the 46 base by gathering additional KC-135s. Obviously, at some point, that airframe will be retired, and Fairchild remains in good position to continue the mission of Air Mobility Command. Next slide, please. From a planning perspective, I love this slide because it shows exactly corner to corner in the United States on these bases. So when you think of picking one of these, MacDill certainly has infrastructure, so does Fairchild. It's almost as if you're looking at this as an Atlantic and a Pacific theater event, and we've all looked at Fairchild as having renewed emphasis as our national defense turns toward China, turns toward the Pacific. That should lead us into good positions. Next slide, please. So these are the things that are looked at in the environmental impact statement itself. Obviously, very short list. The document we handed out this morning is the executive summary of the EIS. If anyone is interested, we will have the full documents posted on our website. EIS products are, as we like to say in planning, sometimes valued by the pound. They get to be very thick and lots of paper in the old days goes into these, but they're very thorough. They look at a lot of these issues, and this is one where Fairchild is strong. And so a letter of support, I think, is warranted by us and will provide the Air Force with continued validation of the level of support that comes from Spokane County for Fairchild. Next slide, please. This is where you can, where the public can submit their comments. And the project website itself, as I said, we will also have these documents on our building and planning website for comments. With that, what we'd suggest is working with Jared, have a potential letter of support drafted for your consideration next week. And if you are ready to endorse that, then we will help administer it and get it into the right hands.
I think, when are they looking at this? What's the dates?
I think it's like March 8th or something. It's fairly short. And it's a little bit frustrating. We were notified, and it came in the other morning, there was a FedEx package on my desk with a letter in it announcing the EIS had been established. The letter was dated 3 weeks before the FedEx overnight package was sent to us. So we lost the first 3 weeks of being able to comment on this, and now we've got about 2 weeks left to put something together.
Yeah, so Jared, it might be helpful too, if you could put something together that, on our individual Facebook pages, commissioner pages, that we could get out to citizens to what the link is.
Sure.
For our Facebook groups to know and be aware of. I think that'd be helpful for that. So I think definitely a letter of support, and the fact that we just received the Abilene Trophy again, with our support, the small arms range, what we're doing to work with the Air Force, for that. I know in June, on the AETC side, they'll be coming to Spokane. So General Robinson will be here, which is our 4-star general, which will be helpful to show off Spokane and Fairchild, as well as, this year's school side. So excited that we were able to make that happen to show
Absolutely.
The general what a great community we are. So looking forward to that.
Such a even recent history of working with the legislator to get millions of dollars of funding in to help take out incompatible base operations and residential things that are within the J-Luz area. This county has a strong history of taking active support, in some cases that support that doesn't happen in too many other bases around the country.
So in this process, they'll probably also be reviewing some of the BRAC findings from previous rounds. And so we should probably develop some kind of response for what we're doing with regard to housing, what we're doing with regard to stormwater, what we're doing with regard to water availability, and I think really playing up the fact that we've got a JLIS in place to help protect Fairchild are some issues that will probably come up in conversation.
I think that's very reasonable. Certainly one other major policy step, the JLIS has been memorialized in the county zoning code. And yet we've all seen over time that there's still some ambiguity in there, particularly as it relates to the comprehensive plan and what's pictured as perhaps a residential use area, but it's no longer allowed. Those are inconsistencies that we can put into an updated plan to make it very clear of what's going on. And similar to the zoning text amendment that you endorsed a while back, prohibiting new residential in the civilian ACZ zones 2 and 3 to provide another level of clear demonstrable safety for aircraft operations. So there are some things we can continue to do on the planning and policy side to bring back for your deliberations as well.
And it's interesting on the housing side, just meeting with Colonel Marshall, who's the vice commander, that, the housing, they're really getting to the point where they're not having the issues with people coming into Fairchild and not being able to find housing, which is interesting, but with, I think, all the apartments that have come in and different things, they're not purchasing housing as much because we're still short on supply there, but he's saying that they're down to an amount that they're feeling much more comfortable with than they were a year ago.
Yeah, there's a mixed message because one of the other commanders has expressed frustration that airmen and women coming into Spokane do not get to enjoy the economic opportunities associated with home ownership, and that the majority of the housing that's been provided for them has been rental housing, so that there's no opportunity for them to engage in any kind of home ownership opportunity and stuff. So, while we've solved one problem in terms of immediate housing, we've not solved the bigger problem of home ownership.
Yes, which is why our condo and townhome legislation would be really good for us. And like I said, it's both sides, but the housing supply isn't there for them to actually purchase, but at least we're not getting dinged any longer on the not being able to find housing at all where we were a year ago from a national perspective. Carriage Homes getting kind of a red flag for that.
Thank you, Commissioners. We will have that back to you quickly.
Thank you.
Very good.
It's like Jared and Mike Sparker.
Good morning, Commissioners. Thank you for having us. Mike and I are here today to provide an overview of some recommendations for an education effort that is related to Measure 1. Measure 1, of course, being the 0.2% sales and use tax bill. Next slide, Ron. Next slide. Oh, are you running it? So the purpose of this effort is to educate Spokane County voters about the November ballot measure, which proposes a 0.2% sales and use tax throughout Spokane County, which will be used for criminal justice, public safety, and behavioral health purposes. The end goal of this education effort will be to encourage a solid voter turnout and a demonstrated understanding by the voters of the reason this measure was put on the ballot in the first place, and then the impacts should the measure pass or not pass. Before getting into the strategy about this education effort, I thought that it would be valuable to discuss the authority that allows the county to provide an education effort for our community. First of all, the motivation for organizing an education effort really comes from RCW 42.17A.55, which defines the prohibitions and exceptions for the use of public office or agencies in the facilitation of campaigns. While it does prohibit the use of local government agency equipment, buildings, staff time, agency publications to influence the outcome of an election, it does not prevent public office or agencies such as Spokane County from making an objective and fair presentation of the facts that are relevant to this ballot measure. The PDC is the agency in charge of enforcing this RCW, and they have determined in their interpretation that it is not only the right, but the responsibility of local government to inform the general public of the operational and maintenance issues facing local agencies. This does include informing the community of the needs of our agency and anything that the community may not realize exists. Furthermore, we did get review of this education proposal from our Spokane legal team. And they did indicate that it was permissive to expend Spokane County funds to outline why the county is proposing this tax, provided the content is not promotional. I think that it also, while we're still on here, I think that it's worth noting that the PDC has determined that local governments can also expend these funds, but it has to be for the purpose of education, and it cannot in any way attempt to influence the outcome of that election. Next slide, Rebecca. So with this in mind, the Measure 1 Communications Working Group, which is really just based of myself and Mike and Ken at this point, we are proposing to hire a public relations firm to assist us with the development and implementation of a broad strategic communications plan that focuses purely on education and follows the guidelines established in the Washington State statute. Elements of this strategic communications plan, as you'll see on this slide, are message development, public outreach, the development of and distribution of collateral material. We do have a paid media element to the strategic communications plan. Earned media, of course, working with our local media outlets to discuss this measure, and then own media, which will just be likely primarily our own website with our own materials such as videos on that website. So the investment of this education effort, we anticipate being approximately $200,000. So this number is based on my previous experience working on these type of education efforts in my previous life, and then also with consultations with several PR firms about this scope of work. So just a brief comments about how this is broken down. We envision the lion's share, the majority of the investment to be used in paid media, public service announcements, $20,000 in developing the strategy and the messaging, approximately $20,000 for our own media, our own media sources. Printing, production, design is somewhat self-explanatory. That's just the cost that goes into those things. Then we have a catch-all of $4,000 for project management and admin costs. So with that in mind, with the election being in November, what we're here today to do is to answer any questions that you may have. Of course, receive input on this plan and this strategy. And should we receive consensus to move forward today, contract will be presented next week on the Tuesday consent agenda for the services discussed here. We will spend the majority of the month of March onboarding the PR firm and preparing and developing that strategic communications plan in anticipation of much more information that will be coming at the end of March. Starting in April, we anticipate beginning community presentations, conducting outreach and response to media outlets in our area, and a soft launch of some of our PSAs along with, very importantly, our website. In Q3, we anticipate doing much of the same as Q2. However, there would be more of an increase in attention on PSA distribution. And then finally, with ballots going out projected to be on October 18th, we anticipate much of the final quarter, which is primarily just the month of October, focused on voter turnout, heavy media involvement, and PSA distribution again. So with that said, I'm sure there are a lot of questions or input that you'd like to provide, and Mike and I are here to do that. We also have some other members of our team that I believe are on the call here. Any questions, commissioners?
Comments?
I just have a question. How do you intend to walk the line between information and promotion? Because it seems like you're saying promotion's illegal.
Promotion is illegal.
But how do you balance that? And I'm sure you could look at other counties and how other government entities educate, but that seems to be a dicey line.
It is, and thankfully we have a gentleman here on our staff named Jim Amacio who keeps us honest.
Where is he? Oh, there he is.
Oh, there, Jim.
He's always around the corner.
And,
Even this weekend.
even yesterday, yes. So with that in mind, though, we did do this as a county, and it was a project that I led in 2017 for the emergency communications tax. And I did show, just as we were starting this conversation again in December, I did show the materials and a lot of the work that we did in 2017 to our legal staff. And they said, yes, things that are similar to what you did back then is fine. You have to be focused primarily, or not primarily, solely on providing the history. So how did we get here? Why was this put on the ballot? And then what will happen if it passes, and what will happen if it doesn't pass? Obviously, we cannot say vote in favor of or vote against. It will not be a sexy campaign. It'll be fact-based. It'll be just bullet points based on facts.
And it's similar to school districts can, if you see the vote yes for a school district levy, that's from their
Right.
kind of their nonprofit group.
Booster groups.
But they can put on the reader boards to vote. The election is coming up this vote by this date. You can say vote, but you can't say which way to vote. And so that's really what the education piece is we just can't say which way to vote. We can just give them the information to make them an informed voter.
Sergeant Friday used to say, just the facts, man, just the facts.
And to Commissioner Cuny's point, one of the things with the school districts, like the newsletters that'll go out to everybody in the district, use that. This is what, if it's a levy or something or a bond, this is what the funds will be used for. Just factual, this is how the dollars will be spent, right?
It's basically giving our voters the information that they need to make their own decision. And everything that we present, you cannot sway them one way or another. It's just, here's what this will do. It's your choice now to, first of all, go out and vote, because this is a very important, yes or no, it is a very important issue. And that's the voter turnout that I discussed. But also so that they feel comfortable when they are filling in that bubble of how they feel about it. They don't have any questions that are left about what will happen with my sales and use tax when this is over, when this is done.
In answer to Commissioner Jordan's question, I think Mr. Webley and Mr. Sparber have set up a team of people, and every document that goes out will be looked over, consistent with the Public Disclosure Commission's guidelines. And so we'll look at it word for word to be sure that we don't run afoul of that. And I think that's what Mr. Webley has recommended, and we will follow as we move forward.
And even though the PDC does seem to be a little bit less staffed than they used to be, we'll be working with them throughout. I mean, that's our goal, is to make sure from the beginning that we don't get into trouble.
Yeah, I mean, we've done this before on a couple other ballot measures, so it's not our first time to the rodeo. But the goal is to be as transparent as possible in terms of getting information out to the voters so that they can make the best decision that they can make, the best information they have. So.
And I have a couple of resources that I'm also excited about, and that's that we have two counties in the state that are going through the exact same process. We have Grant County and Benton County right now, who are one is in May and one is in November. So I have a peer group that we're working on this together.
So I think I have the same concerns as in the conversation we had about going to the city for starting to get the application going for the conditional use permit, is that, I mean, to your point, Commissioner Kearns, you present the facts, right? I don't know, I've only been here 7 weeks, but I don't know if we've fully determined, based on my reading of Measure 1, what will the taxes fund in our system? It's worded pretty broadly at this point. So I'm personally not gonna support anything until we have the information determined as to where the tax dollars would go. And right now, I mean, we've talked about a new facility, we've talked about programs, none of that has been defined yet. So I don't know what the facts are that we would be presenting. And I know Mike's been working on that, but I feel like we're kind of backwards here. Like when we went out, when you went out for the 911 communications, if I remember correctly, it was clearly identified what the funds would be going to. So anyway, I'm not fully on board with Measure 1 because I don't know, and we haven't had a conversation with the community about what we would fund with those tax dollars, so.
And I would just add to that, and thank you, Commissioner. I think it's our responsibility to inform the public about what is going on with our detention facility, the decisions you guys have to make. And I think this is going to be our best foot forward of informing the public on just the overcrowded conditions, the conditions at Geiger, and things you all are aware of, having toured and been a part of it. I think it's our obligation to inform the public just what's driving this, what's behind it. The fact that we have been preparing for this for 10 years, as you alluded to, and going through the facts. We've had several consultants come through the door and professionals helping us with this. This isn't something that we just decided to do. This is a long process and history behind it to get to this point to where we're at right now. And I think if we toe the mark, as to Jim and Michio's point, and stay with just the facts, our jail is overcrowded. This is what it looks like. Geiger is in this deteriorating state, and these are the things that we need to present. Conditions of confinement, working conditions for our staff. These are the things I think we educate our public on and let them make the decision, based on those. The design of it, as you're saying, the plan, and to say that there is no plan kind of does a disservice to a lot of people that have plugged into this and planned all along up to this point. Otherwise, we would be 5 to 10 years in arrears trying to make this effort. A lot has gone into this thing. A lot has been upfront planning on it. So I think that's what we focus on, Commissioner. I think we focus on that point and where we're going with it, inform the public. I mean, the jail, quite frankly, is one of those, unless something bad happens, no one even pays much attention to it. They don't understand the conditions of it, the overcrowded conditions, and so forth. That's where I would try to steer this, kind of point this in that direction. So.
And my note that I'd like to give on why we're bringing this forward now when we don't have the materials that we're going to be educating on is that we just want to be able to hit the ground running because it does take some time to get these type of processes going and onboarding.
And this is just one track of the whole project as a whole. I mean, there's the conditional use permit that you talked about, there's the planning process, there's the Justice Department, there's our track, there's the programs track. There's several tracks that will be back in front of you talking about our work and what we're doing, so.
I have a timeline concern that I don't blame the staff for. I think that I have no doubt that the staff will do the best job to be professional and do your job within the timeline that you've been given. My concern is that the resolution passed in December that put this on the ballot set a timeline in motion that now you're trying to scramble and deal with, frankly. And I know you're working hard on it. I know that Mr. Sparber is working on a needs assessment, right, to inform on that design and plan. But today, we've already got a measure on the ballot, and now we're being asked to spend money to educate the public on it, but we don't have specificity around what those needs are yet. We don't have specificity on what the cost specifically of this facility will be. We don't have specificity on how many beds are needed. And to me, it seems like that is the board's responsibility to do the homework ahead of time. So that's my concern at this point. I appreciate what the staff is doing, trying to work within those boundaries, but to me, the challenge is the time frame that was set in motion by the board itself. So I just think we're putting the cart before the horse right now, but I appreciate you folks doing your job.
I think it's a great plan. All the conversations we've had over multiple years have pointed to we need to get to direct supervision so we do not have inmates that are in their cells for 23 hours a day. We need a facility that has classrooms, that has other spaces where we can introduce different therapeutic programs. We have a facility out on the West Plains where the kitchen is on the first floor. It's about ready to be in the basement because it's about ready to collapse in there. The new facility will be built onto the back of the existing jail, thus saving our current sort of more, I guess you could say, what, I don't know how we would define those, but essentially your solid concrete walls, your more heightened supervision, heightened what's it? Please help me with the terminology. I'm blanking on.
Improved supervision.
Sure. Yeah. So, but the newer facility will be sort of our less hardened criminals that are in there. We'll have different transition beds. I believe the numbers that we looked at back in December showed we could bond up to about $260 million for a facility, thus leaving an acceptable amount of dollars that could be used for the programming or in heightened programming for a new facility. All it comes down to is us just determining how many are sort of those medium beds to those sort of lower level beds. So no, a lot of this work has been done. We know the deficiencies of the current building. So I mean, I fully respect pandering to our bases here, but the facts are there. I know you both toured the jail. You know the deficiencies that are there. Anybody that does tour it knows the deficiencies that are there. I think this is a well thought out program. The only timeline we're on is that, yes, the first Tuesday that follows a Monday in November is an election. We don't set that. That's nationwide. So yeah, we decided to put it on a ballot now because we've been kicking this can down the road for God knows how long. It should have probably been on a ballot 10 years ago, 15 years ago. This facility is as old as I am. The day it opened, it's been operational 24 hours a day, 365 days a year. It's old, it's beat down, it's expensive. We need a new one to keep the community safe. So I think this is fantastic. Stick to the facts and let's see what the voters say. Do they want one or don't they?
Sure, why not? This conversation, actually, I got first involved in when I was with the city. And then when I got to the county, I've been involved with it every year for the last 12 years. We have kicked this dog, and it's time to make a decision. It's time to give our public the time to make a decision. We provide the information. That's what the campaign is about. It's about providing factual information. That's right. It's about transparency, which I think several of us campaigned on in this last election. Well, here we are trying to be transparent with the public, explain to them where we're at, what the situation is, and then give them the opportunity to weigh in and make a decision. And we'll respond to the decision. You know, it's easy to say no. It's hard to come up with a solution. And so far, all I've heard is no, and I haven't seen any other solutions. 12 years. It's time the voters had a say in this. And then we'll respond to whatever the voters say they want us to respond to. I've sat here too many times and gotten phone calls from Mr. Sparber late at night saying we've had another fatality in the jail. I hope neither one of you have to get that phone call. It's a hard phone call. And to know that it happened in a jail that should have been replaced a long time ago, we got to be able to do better and stuff. So I applaud you for putting this together. I know what you're capable of because I've seen you do it in other campaigns. We can walk the line, make sure that we inform the public, give them the facts, be very transparent about the facts. Let them make a decision. I don't know why we're afraid of letting the public decide. What's the fear? I mean, it's their money. It's their decision. It's their safety that's on the line. It's about being able to lock up people that will do them harm that's on the line. I'm all in favor of moving forward.
So I've had additional conversations with Mike over the last month to kind of figure this out because I understand the perspective that we don't have it nailed down as to what it's going to be. But I've come back to it's almost the chicken and the egg. Like we need to know what the funding potential is to determine what the facility is going to be. Since it's on for the 0.2% versus a bond. If it passes, then we start to accrue those revenues to then hire the consultants to come in and really do the due diligence that we need to do to see what that facility will be. And so I've kind of gotten my, worked through it in my mind that putting it on the ballot and having it be on the ballot since it's already there, and being able to talk to the citizens that we don't have the exact plan, but that's part of, we need to have the funds to know, to start to work through that. I'm gonna be okay with us spending the money to then see where we're at, because we do know that the facility isn't working. We're 30 corrections officers down. We have to figure out how we help promote that. And I think knowing a new facility would be coming and it's gonna look different than just a maximum security downtown, will help look at that recruitment for our citizens. So, or for the employees as well as then the citizens, knowing that change is gonna be coming and letting them vote if that change is gonna happen. So where are the funds for this going to be coming out of?
We completely expected that question. So funding for this would come from the general fund balance. But if the vote on the sales tax is a yes and it proceeds, then those funds would be reimbursed to the general fund.
Okay, so you'll have to be making the case to the general public as to how we, the need for the funds without having that structure, exactly in place. And so that's part of that education process, I think, that people need to have.
And I think also it's just educating the public on what the needs are. I mean, a good robust telling them what they need to understand it. And that's what's going to certainly be a big part of this effort.
So I want to clarify that we need a new facility to support our low-level offenders or those who are serving out their sentences. Geiger's not a long-term solution. My concern is we're going out to the voters asking for almost $1 billion just for the county over 30 years of sales tax. And I'm not convinced that putting all those dollars at the end of the criminal justice system to promote anti-recidivism, right? To support folks after they're already incarcerated. I am not convinced that that's the best use of all of those dollars. So when I say I need more detail and we need to have a conversation about what does success look like for our community if they vote for this, I'm doing my due diligence to go and learn about every piece of the criminal justice system, from crime prevention to intervention to what our sheriff's department is doing to what our public defenders and our prosecutor and our judges and our court system is doing. We've got problems all along the spectrum. We have issues that are keeping people in jail longer than what they would need to be to go through the system. And so if we're not going to fix other pieces, if we're not going to have a conversation with the community about all those pieces, I'm very concerned that if we put all our eggs in the end of the system, I'm not sure if we're making our community safer or if we're going to address the overcrowding issues long term. So that's my biggest concern, is that this is an opportunity, the way it's framed around behavioral health, criminal justice, and public safety. We can use these dollars and invest them from preventing crime at the beginning of the system to trying to restore folks back into the community right at the end of the system. But I'm not convinced yet that we are looking at the whole system and thinking how we could, maximize these taxpayer dollars if this were to pass. So that's what I'm concerned about, is that our community is going to say, well, how do we know that in 10, 20 years, we're not just going to be overcrowded again because our court system is backed up and people are waiting trials for over a year. So that's the concern, is that we can build a new facility that works really much better than what we have today to educate folks and give them opportunities for jobs and a better future once they're already incarcerated. But if we're not also investing in other parts of the system, I'm not sure what the promise is to our community. So that's where I think it's worth having a conversation about investments that could be made in various parts of the system. Whether it's, you know, a night court or these other things that we've discussed. Because if we're not gonna invest in those, people are just gonna be sitting and taking up those beds, no matter how many we build. So that's my little, yeah. Commissioner French.
But we have been making those investments. We made those investments in the uptrust program for the PA, so that we could avoid the increased number of FTAs. We've made investments into supportive release. We've made investments into mental health. We've made investments in a variety of different things that impact the criminal justice system. So to say we haven't done anything.
No, I say this is an opportunity to do more,
Well, but.
because we still have overcrowding.
Well, but keep in mind that, you know, we don't arrest, we don't prosecute, we don't defend, we don't adjudicate. We're the landlord for the jail. That's our job. That's our sole job. That's the only job we have authority over. We can't tell the sheriff who to arrest, can't tell the judges who to release, can't tell the prosecutor or public defender how to do their job. We're the landlord for the jail. That's our job. That's our authority to do. And so this is part of that. We've made investments to try and divert. We've made investments to try and help people as supported release. We've made partnerships with the AGC to help train people on how to get jobs so that when they get released, they can go back into the community and be contributive members of the community. We've done all of that.
But we just started the
And
supported
we're still
release. So
overcrowded.
we'll have to see.
We're
how-
overcrowded because the jail was undersized. So, I wish, well, and we even have the state legislature working against us. The Blake decision and a bunch of other things, I mean, they're working against us. So what are the things that we can control? And what is our role to contribute to this system? We're the landlord for the jail. We're the ones that are charged with the incarceration side of the equation. So in that situation, we've spent years trying to say, what's the right size? We've spent years trying to define what's the mix between, low level and fully incarcerated. But it's you can study this thing to death and still not come to a conclusion. It's time to let the voters say, hey, we either agree with what you're doing, we don't agree with what you're doing, and then allow them to live with the consequences. But to continue to worry this thing to death and coulda, woulda, shoulda, I just think, my God, we've been through the blueprint for reform. We've done what we can. We've created the criminal justice system so that, those that are in a position to make decisions that we cannot make, being the judges, can come together and see how do we make this system better. But I can't tell a district court judge to let these people out. I can't tell a superior court judge to lock this person up. I don't have that authority, but I can make sure that we got the facilities necessary to make sure that people are safe in the neighborhood. That's what our job is.
And I would just add too that I'm going to come with a systems approach. When we sit down and we look at what the forecast is for the beds, the amount of beds that we're going to use, i.e., the jail back to direct supervision, 462, what the minimum and medium population looks like to one, offset the population from Geiger to pull it back, two, to undouble the jail will flow into these medium and minimum beds, what the size of the community corrections center is going to be, and then the processes all the way up to it, including the front end diversion, what we have right now, what could be recommended, and then also to understand that this is the amount of beds at the forecast. And I looked at the forecast from GFA and David Bennett's, and we're not that far off. Commissioner, we're close. And that's with a lot of recommendations by the JFA that I've taken into account. So when I get there, it'll be a systems approach. You'll see the whole system as it's laid out and the amount of beds that we've earmarked for it. That's our time to sit down together and say, okay, this is what we have before us. how do we insert the pieces we want to insert along the way to make sure that we have the success we need. Okay?
And I wanna thank Mike for taking the time to introduce me as a new commissioner to parts of the system. I'm still learning and studying from beginning to end, right? From the prevention all the way to the anti-recidivism work. I think that every elected official at this table wants public safety. And it's just a question of what's the best way to spend our limited dollars to make the most impact. I think that the public expects that when we're going to ask them to raise their taxes to fund something, we better have our act together and know what we're spending the money on and have confidence that it's being spent in the best way. And so that's the question for me, is do we have our act together? And I think, and how do we look at this system, and we see the need for reform all along the way. And I do commend some of the steps that have been taken with the Crisis Center, Stabilization Center. There have been some positive steps. Blueprint for reform, many of the items are not done today. The supported release contract was just approved last month. So it's just not the case to say that all of those things are exhausted. I know there's been work done, but I just think that the public has a right to know what the plan is, and we're still doing the needs assessment. That's fundamentally my problem, which I just don't think is your fault. So I appreciate the discussion today. I just think that it's really a great opportunity to look at the full system from the number of judges we have. You know, the court system is telling us that it's overwhelmed. That is the county commissioners that have a role in funding the capacity of the judicial system. So I do think we have influence on this system. We convene the Regional Law and Justice Council. So I just worry that we're putting the cart before the horse at this point. So, but I'll stay engaged in the conversation. I look forward to seeing what that plan ultimately is.
So, are you looking for a motion for us to go ahead and approve this budget today, or is this going to be on a consent agenda coming forward?
Yeah.
Okay.
Consent for next week.
It'll be on the consent agenda.
Okay.
So I believe you have 3 people willing, saying that we've already put it on the consent agenda.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Jeff. I'm going to take us to Jeff McMorris. We only get to move this way.
So this is a follow-up from a discussion started last week. Oh, this is a very high chair. So March 1st is the deadline from Senator Murray's office for the board to submit any request, commonly known as earmarked congressionally directed spending is what the Senate refers to them by. And so I wanted to see what ideas you guys had to bring forward. Last year we put in 3 requests, the same 3 to both Senate and the one House office. The Craig Road out near the airport transload facility was funded for $3 million. The 2 that were not funded was Patch Road up near Bidwell Park between the Midway Elementary and the park. And then there was also a request for the Avista Stadium upgrades. All 3 requests were submitted at $3 million. $3 to $5 million is kind of considered the appropriate upper end of the range. But they are due next Wednesday. And each project requires 3 letters of support from community organizations. So we need a little bit of a lead time on decisions to find the appropriate groups. I sent around some links to all the offices last week on ideas. I also printed off, this is our state legislative agenda. I don't know if there's anything on here that would have your interest to request for funding at the federal level. Bottom of page 2 and top of page 3 are more of the infrastructure parts of what our requests were at the state level. There's also the option of doing programmatic request, which is really asking an agency to carry out or stop carrying out a certain action. So the programmatic request as well as the financial requests.
So sorry, what were the first 3 things that you mentioned, Jeff? You said the Avista Stadium,
Last year, the Craig Road was funded
Craig
last
Road was
year.
fun- okay.
And then the Avista Stadium and Hatch Road between Bidwell Park and Midway Elementary was the other
Okay.
request.
Got it.
So we could make those, you can make the same requests again. We'll come up with something completely different. The sheriff usually puts in their own requests, at least historically. We have a new sheriff in town. So I assume that.
Should we reach out to his office and?
Well, they do it separate from the board. Medical examiner in recent years has also put in her own requests, and they have been funded in recent years. There have been more in the 6-figure range, kind of smaller requests in the 3 to 5 million.
So do you know what requests were filled within the county, not just the board, but within the county as other requests that are coming in? Because I know the city, the city of the valley, everybody puts in requests, and so it's kind of, it'd be interesting to see what were the types of things that were funded.
I don't know at the top of my head. I do know the Barker Road, the segment that's in the city limits from the freeway to before you get to where it goes up to the Morningside neighborhood was funded. An area of huge growth, and they're wanting to 4-lane that. So I know that was one that the valley put in. I believe the Pines overpass of the Pines Trent area has received federal funding from the valley. I would expect the Barker Road in the valley, which is also getting an overpass to the tracks. That whole bridge, the valley, if am I marketing correct, has received a lot of funding in recent years. So I know that's one area. I don't know, the city did get one last year up on Wellesley area. Wellesley might have been in north, but it was up around the Northeast PDA. You remember that road that received funding? I believe that was 2 years ago.
Wellesley.
It was Wellesley, okay. So that's another city one.
So is that part of the earmarks or part of raised grants for transportation? 'Cause
I believe those were earmarks. Was that raise? I don't think we did very well with raise.
I don't think it's raised.
Since I've been with the county, so I'm pretty, when I mean we haven't done well, I think we've been a big bad. So, my guess is those were all an earmark process, a direct allocations. I'm sure there's more with the city, I just don't have those top of head. Nonprofits are also eligible and sometimes receive funding. For-profit organizations are not eligible to request.
So it has to be turned in next Wednesday.
Next Wednesday for Senator Murray's office. The actual committee cutoff dates, or the subcommittee, there's 12 subcommittees in approach, 9 of them are accepting these requests. And that ranges from the end of the month to halfway through April. But each office has their own lead up time, so they have time to do their due diligence and make decisions on which ones they want to put their names behind. I don't have Senator Cantwell's date yet. We have voicemails we're exchanging with her office.
Okay.
And the House hasn't set their dates yet.
And who are,
Go ahead, I can wait
I was gonna say, who are we working with Senator Murray's office, just because with John Colton having left?
It'll be Lizette when she onboards, I think later this week.
Because I think she doesn't come on.
Is it next week? It's either this week or next week.
I thought she came on March 1.
I must be thinking middle of next week then.
Yeah, March 1 and stuff,
So Colton sent around emails before he left, so we have that. And I can give him a call.
Because he would typically kind of look at where everything was and try to help
Gives a little bit of guidance, yes.
guidance as to what he thought would work or not, so.
I know all three of the federal delegations have interest in supporting Fairchild, much like I do, and I think the board does. They did fund the $3 million to help improve Craig Road. They're gonna do their second gate there at Thorpe and Craig Road and stuff, and so the other thing that would improve transportation to the base would be that interchange at Craig and I-90. And smoothing that out, doing a traffic circle there so you could cut back the request from the 34 million to 3 million to just cover that circle, and that would, my guess is, fall within their criteria, and it's measured to support Fairchild.
Other thoughts or ideas?
I was just gonna say, I'll continue to advocate for North Hatch. It's the one main road that leads to our park, our county Northside Aquatic Center. I think makes sense for us to keep that in good shape.
How do we plan to make these requests as the county?
It's actually, once the board makes a decision, it's an online form. And so you have to go through the questions, answer them. You upload the letters of support, those required community letters of support. So it takes a bit of time I'll work with, if the road things, I work with our department to make sure we have the details correct on what could actually be funded with a certain amount of funding.
So to Commissioner French's idea, the benefit for that project would be you could get letters of support from Fairchild, the airport, or
S3R3.
S3R3.
Medical
Right. So I mean,
Yeah,
it's
airport.
beneficial to think about projects that have a lot of stakeholders that could weigh in.
Yeah.
So that one does seem like you could whittle it down to just that one.
Just take that one piece of it out of the big
Roundabout.
package and,
Yeah.
That way they can show that they're continuing to support Fairchild in terms of getting Fairchild that second gate. The challenge with the first gate is there's so much traffic on Highway 2, and they've got time sequences that they have to have their airmen and women on base by, and it's just getting too congested. So coming in that second gate is a priority. Then
What about the Argonne Upriver Drive intersection that's on here? Is there a portion of that that could be, asked for a match for that? Is that something, I know we have it on the state, we listed it, but we didn't make it a priority.
I do know getting the state form, the extra detail in that we needed to last week, talking with our roads department, that is the one project on the state list that's not feasible per se. It is it's one big project.
in or you're out.
So unlike the ones that are bigger dollar amounts, we couldn't break it into phases at different levels. So we would need.
So that wouldn't work, because you said 3 million would kind of be the.
We could go to the 5. But then the county would, if we get the money to execute the project, the county would need to come up with the extra $1.5 million.
Yeah.
Unless the state, we do have it in, for the state, so if the state gave us some funding, then those two together could possibly cover it. But just because of my questions last week, I do know the upriver Argonne is not feasible.
I saw all the other, you got Millwood, you got some small cities and the different,
Friends of the Trail. the
yeah,
Centennial Trail
connections
supporters
to,
are-
connections to the business and the industrial park in the valley and things like that, so, yeah. Okay, it sounds like though you can't really piecemeal that one.
That particular one we could, if the county wanted to be committed to funding the rest of the project, that's not something I put in, that's y'all's decision.
Isn't it inside the cities? You've got inside the city, the valley, and
Correct, yeah, it's
inside
not
there,
our
so,
project or.
we don't have authority to go in their jurisdiction.
So are you hoping to get a decision on priorities now, so that you've got a little time to
Little
prepare
time.
applications?
If we wait till next Monday, it's a 48-hour turnaround to gather letters. I'm
Saying you
personally not
can't make it
comfortable
happen.
asking people to write a letter just in case maybe. It's nicer to at least know there's at least one project that if we could start gathering that.
Well, I could have all your letters of support for the Craig Road I-90 interchange probably before the end of the week. That would be easy to get.
I agree that one's, Hatch Road, we could probably use the same letters from last year, just send them back out with new signatures and new date stamps. We already have those in hand.
So your goal is to have 3, so we can send it to each office.
The reason we had 3 last year was to make one each a top priority for each office. I would say that plan was really not successful, that the one that was funded was not advocated for by the one who made it the #1 priority. The other 2 did advocate and it was funded. So you could put all of your eggs in a couple smaller baskets, so to speak. I don't think we should go more than 3, quite honestly. That's just my thought, because if you're the senator or the congresswoman, you're going to be balancing this with all the other requests coming from the community. So I just think if we have too many eggs in that basket, it's
We get passed over.
yeah.
I'd still put a Vista Stadium in there too, because if we got additional funding, if there's overages or that kind of thing, then that would help with whatever that potentially could be, or reduce our costs. So, but I think we could go down to even just put $1 million in and not ask for 3. Make it a smaller ask. And there's lots of support for that already.
Yeah, and we have letters last year too that we could build upon. Is there consensus around the Craig Road, the Hatch Road, and the Vista? We can make changes next week. It'd be a whole lot easier to just be rounding up letters for one project if we're adding them.
That sounds like a good
Let's
plan
go.
for now, yeah.
So then also in the world of federal is GSI yesterday. They mentioned it on a call on Friday. But yesterday they sent around, they are creating their federal agenda. So we had their state agenda that went out in December. This is the 2022 federal agenda. They said all items will carry forward unless they were dealt with last year, unless the GSI board actually has a vote to remove it. So most likely everything in this document will continue. Also, the same deadline next Wednesday for the county to add any thoughts that they would like in this. The very last page I just stapled on their request form. So we sent in multiple requests for the state agenda. We need to get these in by next Wednesday, and then they will use the month of March to go through their process. They have their individual policy committee, and then it goes to the board action. So they'll need that month, and their goal is to have this put together before the DC fly-in, which is April 24th. But they're hoping on their March 27th to have the full board approval of GSI. So if anybody has ideas that they know they'd like included, or this is, kind of a quick turnaround also, but we just got this one.
So they're looking for feedback, either thumbs up or.
Well, this is just
feedback.
their 22 document,
Yeah.
which I printed out for, you'll notice that it's less earmarky and more conceptual. There's a couple direct requests in there.
Is earmarky a word?
It is in the political table, yes. Solid verb there.
Clarifying.
Unless you use it as an M. And, but it's certainly one, GSI being a very broad consortium, it definitely tends to the 2-by-law list versus the controversial list. But if there's interest in this board having some direct things, I think we don't need letters of support. report, so that is something I could turn quickly next week. If you guys want to revisit that next week.
I mean, the only thing I can see on here, based on what we saw last year from a federal delegation, is under the Military and Veterans Affairs. Excuse me, you might want to add, improving transportation access to the Fairchild Air Force Base. Consistent with how they funded last year and funding Craig Road, that was the impetus, is Fairchild. And so it would seem to me that, including that as a priority might be consistent with the decisions they've already made. For the benefit of our new commissioners, Patty Murray has been just, as well as Morris Rogers, have just been staunch advocates about getting the 46A tanker here at Fairchild, and Senator Murray has just gone to the mat a number of times, and I think now in her office she has mounted as trophies previous military commanders that disagreed with her. I mean, she's a regular pit bull when it comes to being able to support and expand Fairchild and stuff. So I know that still continues to be a very big passion, as well as Cantwell and stuff. So I just want to, if this is a passion they have, then we want to be able to build on it and stuff. So
The only thing I don't see, and it's probably not a traditional area that the communities really had a lot of specific policy, is like around housing. Just, like more, maybe there's always been a call for more housing vouchers at the federal level to come down to support affordable housing. I don't know if that's of interest, or if there's some housing related federal policies that want to encourage to GSI, but that's just the only thing I don't see.
the only place they got it is on the military.
Yeah, which is great, but
Yeah,
Yeah.
but.
I mean, we're kind
The whole
of,
rest of
we're in
the
a housing
world.
crisis, so
Yeah.
what can the feds do to help us out?
There'll be something to add. Back.
And I don't have any, I know there's others in the community that have maybe specific policy areas that we could weigh in on. I know, Pam at the Housing Authority and others.
I look at Wasatch's federal, because we had a housing section.
So I have the Fairchild area transportation access, reaching out to Tampar and Wasatch, looking for some housing language that we could.
That's a good call. Like NACO probably has some housing focused legislation.
Yeah, and Wasatch we specifically did as well.
Good.
And if other stuff comes up, just shoot me an email or let me know. We can do the work on that. The one other thing I just wanted to call out was they have opened registration for the DC fly-in with GSI. So it's the last week of April, the 25th to the 28th. That's a Tuesday to Friday. The Tuesday really is a travel day. The first event is a evening welcome reception that night. So it's Wednesday, Thursday on the Hill, some optional things on Friday, depending whether you want to return on the morning flights or the evening flights, which are kind of the flight patterns I'm aware of. We usually do first thing in the morning or 5, 6 o'clock in the evening. So just wanted to be looking around your schedule. If you're looking at going, I've heard from Kearns and Huey's offices that they're looking at that.
Yeah, I'll be going that weekend before, and we'll have meetings Monday and Tuesday before the rest of the group gets there.
Okay.
They're gonna advocate on behalf of SIA and S3R3.
So we'll get some of that going, and that's.
We'll report back.
So I know that Jake had put out an email with regard to trying to put together a group to go to the Pentagon. And I had expressed an interest in being part of that group because of housing and water and PFAS and a variety of other issues that affect the West Plains and Fairchild and stuff. And so I don't know, I think it's a little too late for them to schedule a trip to the Pentagon. Usually it requires that our congresswoman and our senator is going to be part of that to be able to get us into the meeting, and her schedule is probably booked out by now, but I don't know that to be a fact. But I did express an interest in being part of that group, and since we're now a group of 5, then it can be 2 of us, so if the chair wanted to be there as well, we could do that and still jeopardize the quorum issue.
Because traditionally it's been the chair, but as a civic leader as well, it's.
I'll find out. Don't they usually have a Pentagon group, it seems?
They do.
They usually do, but they usually started a lot sooner than now. Usually they have the conversation starting in like the fall.
I'll check. I mean, that conversation may have started and I'm just not aware yet. So I'm gonna find out what their specific breakouts are. I know when I was working for HUD, I helped facilitate all HUD. Meeting with the secretary.
If you check, because if we need to get a contact, but.
So any other priority areas like that we would check on?
I was looking for childcare. I see they have priorities around that. So.
I would probably also be reaching out to FHA, the Highways Administration, to set up a meeting with them, because the connection with the I-90 will involve some coordination with them as well. So it was suggested by WashDOT that I make that visit.
That's all I have. We'll get to work.
Great, thank you. Okay, Chairman Michaud,
Thank you, Chairman CUNY.
running a little late, so sorry.
Works out well with me. Rebecca, if I could impose upon you to bring up that overhead, please. I think the board has in front of you 2 things. We've got a letter which we received from the United States Department of the Interior, Bureau of Indian Affairs. You've also got the slideshow. And if I could direct your attention to the slideshow on the overhead or the handout which I've given you, which is the same thing. The purpose of this particular meeting is for me to share with you that the board has received an application by the Spokane Tribe of Indians to have 155 acres of real property accepted in trust by the United States of America. And if I could have you, Rebecca, go to the next slide. As identified on this slide, I'm going to share with you what we have received, and then I'm also going to share with you the process that is going to take place as a result of the document which we have received. Rebecca, if we could go to the next slide, please. To give you some historical background on this, and I know the 3 of the county commissioners are very familiar with this. In 1934, Congress enacted the Indian Reorganization Act. And the purpose of the IRA, which is codified in federal law, is to strengthen, encourage, and perpetuate Indian tribes and the historic culture. And as we know, Indian tribes are sovereign entities. And as we move forward, I like to recognize their sovereign entity status in all our dealings with them. The IRA that was adopted in 1934 specifically provides that the United States government may take real property in trust for Indian tribes or individual Indians. The law further provides that if lands are taken into trust, and this is critical, they shall be exempt from state and local taxation. Number 4, the law also provides that in addition to trust lands being exempt from state and local taxes, they are also exempt from local land use regulations. In order to implement the Indian Reorganization Act, they adopted a Code of Federal Regulation. And the Code of Federal Regulation sets forth in a step-by-step process how a tribe goes about converting fee property, which is property it owns in its own right, to trust property. And when I say trust property, it's actually owned by the United States, and that's why it's not subject to any local property taxes or road taxes, and also why it's not subject to land use regulations. If I could please have Rebecca go to the first slide again. I'd like to very briefly go to the first slide. In the first slide, board members, I have identified the 5 properties which the Spokane tribe has requested be converted from fee to trust. And if you'll, Rebecca, can you please go to the slide that I just gave you that I'd like you to pull up? I've had see if she pulls that up very quickly. I've had the Public Works Department prepare a slide which identifies the 155 acres which they want to change from fee to trust, and its proximity, if you will, to Fairchild Air Force Base, and they're a little bit bigger, Fairchild Air Force Base, and the Airway Heights. So if you look at the document that's in front of you on the screen, the green area is the MIA 34. The purple area is the area which is going to be subject to the fee to trust. And as you'll see, it is adjacent to the present gaming facilities, which are owned in trust by the federal government and have been annexed into the city of Airway Heights. Before I move forward, does the board have any questions about this particular slide? You can see that the boundaries of Airway Heights are identified. You can see that the purple area indicates the 155 acres, which is subject to the fee to trust request. And you can also see the green, which is MAI 34, which I'll discuss very briefly.
Jim,
Yes, Commissioner French.
Do we have any indication as to whether this property will be annexed into the city of Airway Heights or not?
The application does not indicate that one way or the other, Commissioner French. So I do not know the answer to that inquiry. As the board knows, the present gaming facilities owned by the Spokane tribe, they too were modified from fee to trust, and then they were ultimately annexed into the city of Airway Heights. And of course, when they became annexed, the city of Airway Heights made certain commitments to provide sewer service and water services to the property that was annexed. But in answer to your question, Commissioner French, the application doesn't indicate anything to that effect, and I have not received any communications from the tribe or Airway Heights.
Okay.
If I could please have you, Rebecca, go back, if you could, to the slide we were on. I wanted to briefly share with the board the process that's going to be used. And that's slide 4. And as Rebecca gets to slide 4, let me start on that so we can save some time. The first thing is, an application is filed by the Spokane tribe with the United States Department of the Interior, Bureau of Indian Affairs. Once the application is complete, the notice of application is sent to various jurisdictions. In this case, Spokane County and the city of Airway Heights were the only jurisdictions who received notice of the application. The application advises all parties that you have 30 days to respond to the application, And if you provide any responses within the 30 days, they will be considered by the Bureau of Indian Affairs. If you don't, they will move forward to take action on the application without any input. Item number 4 is set forth in the letter which you received a copy, and it articulates certain information which they've asked us to respond to. And under 4A, it indicates the annual amount of property taxes that we would lose if the property is converted from fee to trust. Under item B, it indicates if it's subject to zoning, what would happen if the property is transferred from fee to trust. And item number C, it wants to know if there's any governmental services which we are presently providing to the 155 acres. Once the 30-day time frame is up, the designee from the Secretary of the Interior will either grant or deny the application. I have not seen any applications that have not been granted by the Secretary of the Interior. The law provides that they only have to, quote, consider the information they've received. It doesn't indicate how it should be balanced or weighed, just that they have to consider it. And then under number six, any decision that's ultimately made by the designee can be appealed to the Secretary of the Interior, and ultimately that can go to court. If I can have Rebecca go to the next slide. I'd like to share with you the present amount of taxes that are being paid by the 155 acres. And in this particular chart, I've identified the parcel number, each one of the 5. I've broken it down on the parcel size, as you'll see. And then on the right-hand side, board members, I've only identified the loss of county taxes. And when I say county taxes, I mean the road tax and the property tax. And as the board knows, most of the amount of taxes we pay go to other entities other than Spokane County. So the bottom line is on this chart, the 155 acres pay $780.10 in property taxes and road taxes to the county in 2022. I yet don't know what they're going to pay in 2023 because I couldn't find it on the website, but that will be updated. If I could go to the next slide, which is also important. Spokane County's been down this road before. As I indicated on the other slide, and if I could have you go to that additional slide, Rebecca. This piece of property is presently zoned rural traditional, and over the next 20-year time frame, it's proposed to go into urban, if you will. Regardless of what is presently zoned, however, it is subject to the Airport Overlay Zone, Fairchild Air Force Overlay Zone, which was adopted by Spokane County and other jurisdictions. Under the Airport Overlay Zone, we've adopted MIA areas, military influence areas. And in military influence areas, we have limited substantially the kinds of uses and densities allowed because for public safety reasons. So on the map, which you're presently looking at on the screen, MIA 3-4 is identified in green, and you'll see the property which is the subject of this conversion from fee to trust is identified in purple. And so it's clearly within MIA 3-4. Problem is, when the property is converted from fee to trust, the federal government is not subject to the county's zoning ordinances. It's up to them how they want to move forward in this regard. I think the Spokane Tribe of Indians, of course, have tried to work with Spokane County in conjunction with their gaming facilities, and we expect that they will continue to work in that regard as we move forward on this particular piece of property. The application which we presently have in front of us indicates they do not plan to change the use. I'll say that one more time. They do not plan to change the use. But as we know, once the property is converted from fee to trust, they can put any lawful use on the property without coming back to Spokane County. They cannot put gaming activities on the property until they seek a separate permit from the United States Secretary of the Interior to undertake gaming activities. At the present time, their application does not indicate they're going to engage in any gaming activities on this 155 acre parcel. So why am I here? Excuse me, Commissioner French.
But if they did make an application to BIA, more than likely it will be approved, because there would be no reason to not approve it with casino approved just right next door and sharing common property line.
Commissioner French, I think that's an excellent observation. I think you're correct. I think we know how the Secretary of the Interior reviews these particular applications. And that's why I showed you the MIA 3-4, because previously the county commissioners took the position that the gaming facility that the Spokane tribe put on their property would run afoul of the MIA 3-4 restrictions, and the Secretary of the Interior did not feel that we adequately made our case. And so they did approve, and the court sustained the gaming facilities on the purple area. I want to say one more thing, and I think Commissioner CUNY, please correct me. Commissioner CUNY is on one of the committees that is set up where the Spokane Tribe of Indians allocates mitigation funds, which they receive from gaming activities, to entities in the area to address increased costs incurred as a result of potentially their gaming on their facility. And I think Commissioner CUNY, the Spokane Tribe of Indians, based upon the recommendations of the committee you're on, have been very good in providing resources to Spokane County to address some of the adverse impacts that may have been undertaken as a result of gaming on their facility. And I believe we recently received, I want to say $50,000, Commissioner CUNY, or in that neighborhood.
It was in that neighborhood. I think it was 5,500.
So board members, what I have done so far is this. I've reached out to all your departments and your elected officials and asked them what adverse impacts may take place if this property is transferred from fee to trust. I've got their comments. I am preparing a draft letter for the Board of County Commissioners' signatures, because when you're dealing with a sovereign nation, it should come from the elected officials, not from your staff. And in the letter which I'm drafting, I'm articulating the facts as you've seen them on the screen, its location with regard to the MIA 3-4, the loss of taxes, if you will. I'm also suggesting that we would ask that the Spokane tribe enter into an MOU with Spokane County. And in the MOU, which they've done previously, they would address the loss of tax dollars, if you will, as a result of this. They would make a commitment down the road, if they develop on this property, to pay for the indirect offsite costs on various roadways that may be caused as a result of their development. And also that they consider providing a PILT, if you will, for any increased services that the county may need to provide to this 155 acres as we move forward. When the Spokane tribe originally converted their gaming facility from fee to trust, they signed a similar agreement. I don't know that they wouldn't consider it now, but in the letter which I'm going to prepare for your consideration, I'm going to recommend that they consider a similar MOU on this 155 acres. So unless the board has any additional questions, that's my presentation on this. And I hope to have the letter ready, and I have a resolution which will be on next Tuesday's agenda authorizing the execution of the letter at other than an open meeting.
So you said 50,000, you said 5,500.
50,500.
Yeah.
50,500, thank you.
I said 5,500.
Okay.
So sorry, 50,500.
they've been, even in light of some legal issues that we have with the Spokane tribe, they've consistently participated, Commissioner Cuney, in contracting with Spokane County for a portion of their mitigation funds. And they've been very accommodating. So what I hope to do is I will get this letter out to the board to look over and give me your comments. And then my intent is to have a resolution on next Tuesday's regular agenda as a consent item, authorizing the execution of this letter and sending it back to the Bureau of Indian Affairs for their consideration. Any questions by any of the board members? Yes, Commissioner?
Is the letter separate from the MOU process?
Yes, it
Okay.
is. That is correct.
The letter is just to respond to this.
It is, but
inquiry
that is
process,
correct,
yeah.
Commissioner Jordan. But what in the letter I have recommended them to make this a condition of the approval. And that's what we've done in previous occasions. And generally speaking, what happens is, as a result of this letter, they will reach out possibly to work with Spokane County. I have taken the liberty of contacting their attorney, Scott Weed, who I've worked with before, to see if I can initiate dialogue with regard to some sort of an MOU. Any further questions from board members? Thank you very much, and thank you, Rebecca, for helping me with the slides.
So Jim, question though, so the Bureau of Land Management, I mean, or the interiors, I mean, they really just put these things through, that if we objected or any of that, which is, I mean, because I wasn't here for the last lawsuit. I mean, I think you guys were initiated it, or just you maybe. So can you explain just so I'm
Sure. So, when they put forward, so when they originally took this land and put it into trust, in that agreement with BIA, they specifically said this will not be used for gaming. It would be used for medical facilities and other workforce training, yada, yada, yada. Then, once they got it into trust, then they made an application to go ahead and convert it to gaming. And so we, community leaders, the county, a variety of other, objected because we saw it as an infringement upon Fairchild, and we were, competing for the 46A tanker, and it's right in the flight pattern, and yada, yada, yada. So we filed an objection that went to the BIA and was denied. And then we filed a litigation, and it went to district court, and the judge ruled against us. And so we've kind of beat our heads against the wall trying to predominantly protect Fairchild in terms of the encroachment and stuff. So we've not been successful at trying to make that argument. And so I'm not sure that I would want to go down that road again this time. We have objected with regard to the loss of revenue, whether it was Spokane tribe or the Kalispell tribe. Kalispell's also took land and converted it into trust land, and that's where they've got their large apartment building complex on, so they got housing for the workforce. And we did object to that because of loss of revenue, tax revenue, and then we entered into an agreement with them so that we would get some revenue out of what otherwise would have been property taxes. So for the sake of consistency, you probably want to object for the sake of protecting the right to get revenue replacement. Otherwise, the county is going to end up stuck with providing services, and we won't get compensated for it. We'll negotiate a settlement and some kind of agreement, MOU, and off to the races we go. There's no chance of ever stopping what they want to do. The BIA and Secretary of Interior is motivated to do everything they can to provide financial stability for the tribes. I don't have any issue with that at all. God bless them, that's terrific. It's only the threat to Fairchild is the only reason, and they've already ruled on it, so I don't know that there's that fight is worth fighting again. So it's really about protecting the revenue.
And the interesting thing I'm sorry, Commissioner, you were gonna say something else. The interesting thing about the revenue is, I remember the last time, Commissioner French, when we filed this, we talked about taking the present revenue and kind of projecting it down the road. But the Secretary of the Interior said, listen, we don't care down the road what it's gonna be. We care right now in the year they file their application. And what they say, Commissioner French, is they say, listen, once this property is converted from fee to trust, you no longer have to provide services on the property because it's owned by the federal government. And therefore, there's a savings there. So I've read every single case I've read. That's the way they argue that issue, Commissioner French.
Yep.
And so I think it's a correct statement that from a legal perspective, it's an uphill road to contest a conversion from fee to trust. And I think it's a correct statement also, depending on how well the environmental review is done, when they do gaming, it's an uphill battle to challenge the two-part test for gaming on a particular facility. It really is, because our Fairchild argument, as we learned, was one of the most unique arguments that we ever had, but the federal district court judge didn't feel that we made our case, and he sustained the decision of the Secretary of the Interior approving the gaming application.
BIA and Secretary of Interior are committed to doing what they're going to do. That's a fight not worth fighting. Fighting to try and get revenue replacement is about the only argument you have.
I think you'll find, Commissioner French, when you review the draft document that it worked on, it does all the things you've talked about, and it suggests we'd like an MOU, and we'll see what happens. But again, the Bureau of Indian Affairs, they can approve this without any MOU if they want. And so that's why it's nice to have a good working relationship with the Spokane Tribe of Indians, which Commissioner Cutie, you have built up, and hopefully that will trigger dialogue between myself and Mr. Wheat in some sort of an MOU.
I appreciate that you reached out to Mr. Weed. And I think the approach needs to be collaborative for all the reasons that you outlined, because maybe we can come to a good agreement and potentially influence in the future, any type of development for the good of the whole county.
Yeah, you're right.
So it's good to approach it from like a partnership perspective.
Well, as Commissioner French indicated, with regard to the Kalispel tribe, they originally came in many years ago for their gaming facility, went from fee to trust and then to gaming. And then after that was done, as Commissioner French indicated, they came in with a property to the south to Highway 2 to change that simply from fee to trust, so they could build apartment houses and things of that nature, not necessarily gaming. But as Commissioner French alluded to, because it's owned in trust, they don't pay any taxes on that particular property. And so that is very problematic.
But some of those uses there might not be good uses, right? Like
Exactly, yeah, we have no idea what they're going to put on the 155 acres which we have here, so. Well, if the board have any other individual questions, please feel free to call me and I will get that letter out to you with the attachments ASAP, and it'll be on next Tuesday's consent agenda, regular agenda as a consent item. Thank you for your patience.
Thank you, Jim. Okay, it is noon. I have lost Commissioner Kearns. I think it's important for all of us to be around for the board retreat topic discussions. So do we want to leave that?
do we have time to still finalize that next Monday and talk about facilitators or?
That, or would you like to continue this meeting to after your consent agenda this afternoon and have it at that time?
That's fine.
I mean, I think it's good to have
room in our
agreement on what we prioritize, because then a facilitator would have to know that ahead of time to be preparing, and so.
So because then we have a few other miscellaneous items, the S3R3 solution.
Yeah, that's a real simple one that, if you want, I can deal with that in about 1 minute. So when the interlocal agreement was entered into with regard to the creation of the West Plains PDA. It has a phrase in it that says any changes to the bylaws must be approved by the two jurisdictions. And what we found is a couple, what our attorney likes to call Scribner errors, but it probably is a little bit more than that. There's a provision that says that no member of the S3R3 board can serve more than 2 terms as an officer. That should not have been, it should have been no more than 2 consecutive terms, because 2 terms means that after you serve 2 terms, you're done. And with a small board of 7 people, you run out of people pretty darn quick. So it's a matter of fixing that and another provision with regard to the election of officers. That's all it is. But since it's a bylaw revision, we figured, yep, got to go through the rules and then bring it to us and to the city and stuff. And Brian's on board with it as far as the city's concerned, and feels like it's a non-event. We just got to clean up the bylaws from the attorney making a mistake. God almighty. No, just never happened before. Yeah,
Not to me anyway.
I believe it's coming forward for next week. It's my
Gina's just
understanding.
giving some signs over here.
Is it next week or is it this week?
It just needs to be filed
Yeah.
with the prior charter and bylaws that we have previously approved. So I
Yeah.
didn't need to file it, that's it, no action.
Oh, there's no action taken? Oh, okay. Then that's it. We're
Okay,
sticking
and-
fork in us, we're done.
And Scott, I see you raise your hand.
Yeah, just, yep, can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay, just confirming what Gina said, it's just on file for 10 days. And as Commissioner French said, it was an oversight. The Northeast PDA does not have that language in there. The language is, it's accurate, it's just consecutive terms. And that's what the bylaws were changed for S3R3.
Okay, great. Thank you. So then under miscellaneous, so the Regional Health District has a healthy options. They would like us to do a proclamation for Hope Week for 2023. This came into Gina. So typically on proclamations, we just do, if there's more than 3, a majority of board members, we just do a head nod and then it will show up on the following week's consent agenda and be read as a proclamation. So, and if you have any changes to it, you're welcome to let Jared know. So if everyone's okay with it moving forward, it will appear next week. Okay.
For the record, I am nodding.
Eyes are still open, so.
And then Scott, who's gonna brief on the Vanessa Behan? Was that Heather?
That's me.
Okay, Heather. This is on today's consent agenda.
No, it should be on next week's.
Go ahead.
So this is the 4th of our outside agency agreements that were approved in the budget at the end of last year. This contract is for $83,000. Vanessa Behan at the first of last year took over operations of our children's waiting room. The children's waiting room has been in operation since about 2000. Children's Home Society of Washington was operating it before and had been operating it since inception. And at the end of 2020, they let us know they didn't want to operate it anymore. Vanessa Behan came on board. They've been a great partner. We actually made it all the way through 2022 without the doors being closed at all, which had been kind of an ongoing problem through COVID and even before that, just with keeping staff. They have been able to cross-train their staff at their crisis nursery so that if staff, that is the core staff at the waiting room, is sick or out, COVID related, whatever it is, their staff at the crisis nursery is able to backfill. They served 590 children last year, which equated to about 800 hours of childcare. They serve anybody accessing the court system, jurors, kids. They also were able to add this year, anybody accessing substance abuse treatment was also able to access. So that contract will be on the docket for approval.
And where's that located? Is it over in the
In the
Broadway Center?
Broadway Center building, correct?
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, Scott, any other miscellaneous? So, because otherwise we will continue the board retreat topic discussion till after our 2 o'clock consent agenda.
I do not have anything else, Commissioner.
Okay. Any executive session items?
Nothing from us.
Okay, very good. So then we will be continuing this meeting till after the 2 o'clock consent agenda. As soon as that's over, we will then hit the topic of the board retreat topic discussion of prioritization. So thank you all very much for attending, and we'll see you at 2 o'clock. We're adjourned, or we're continuing. Whatever. Yeah.